That day, Amanda's life went downhill fast. Her husband Bill had had too much to drink, and as usual was fooling around. Drunkenness is a bad thing, but this time his pranks went too far. He decided to teach his wife how to shoot a hunting rifle. Amanda didn't like the idea right away. She didn't even want to hold the gun, and begged him not to. "Bill, please. I've never shot a gun before. I'm bound to do something wrong. I'll break something or hit a neighbor's window. God forbid. You'd better sign me up for the shooting range later," she begged her husband. "What shooting range is there? What do you need a husband for? You do not be afraid. Everything will be now. It's elementary," continued to insist husband. It was impossible to argue with drunk Bill. He constantly psychologically pressured the man and forced others to participate in his entertainment even against their will. And so it was now. Her husband was twisting the gun in Amanda's hands in different directions, showing her how to hold and aim it correctly. And periodically he gave loud commands so that she could aim and pull the trigger correctly. Because of her husband's constant demanding instructions during the training, Amanda became confused and accidentally pulled the trigger just as the barrel was resting against his chest. They had just recently gotten married. Amanda didn't even realize what had happened at first. She stood there with the shotgun in her hand, watching the purple stain on Bill's white t-shirt. The shotgun was loaded with field ammunition designed for big game hunting. My husband thought that if he was going to hunt, he should hunt wild boar or elk. At home, he entertained himself by shooting at moving targets. But today, unexpectedly, the target was himself. Amanda was brought out of her stupor by her mother-in-law's scream. She and her husband were visiting her son. And now, apparently Grace had gone out into the yard to check on the young ones. Then everything, mind you, spun like a kaleidoscope. The ambulance and the police arrived. Amanda then vaguely remembered what had happened. It was all a blur. Deafeningly, as if through absorbent cotton, she could hear her mother-in-law's screams and wails and the questions the police asked her. "Citizen Amanda, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder and will now be taken to a detention cell for a decision on your detention. Is that clear to you?" Amanda remained silent, staring at one point. The policeman handcuffed her and led her to a squad car parked near the scene. The only thing her parents' lawyer was able to do was to change the detention to a non-detention order due to the suspect's pregnancy. Thanks to this, Amanda was able to get to her husband's funeral to say goodbye to him. But a new nightmare awaited her there. Amanda did not want to show her face to her parents-in-law, who now wished her death every time they saw her. So she watched the funeral procession from her hiding place. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her back. Someone had hit her hard from behind. Turning around, Amanda saw a girl she didn't know with a face that was innocent and twisted with anger. She was holding a stick of some kind, which she appeared to be intending to strike again. "Are you out of your mind? Why did you hit me?" Amanda shrieked, but quietly, so as not to attract the attention of the people present at the funeral. Another scandal she would not survive. "I'll kill you, you bastard," screamed the girl, and like an enraged tigress, pounced on Amanda. She barely managed to dodge another blow and grabbed the stick at the last moment. "Stop this at once," Amanda shouted, trying to take the instrument of crime away from the angry girl. "What did I do to you?" "You bitch, you killed the man I love. I'll never forgive you for that," the stranger wailed tearfully. "What lover? Are you mistaking me for someone else, or did you get the funeral wrong? They are burying my husband now." Amanda tried to understand the situation. "His parents forced him to marry you. He always loved only me. And even when you got married, he still came to me. And then you killed him and took him away from me forever," the stranger wept tearfully. "If Bill has gone to the other world, you will go with him. I will avenge him." Only now Amanda realized who was trying to kill her and why. She was facing the mistress of her husband, whose accidental death she feared so much. And now Amanda didn't know if he was really her husband or if her whole family life was a farce. Amanda lowered her hands and said quietly, "I didn't kill Bill, it was an accident. He was drunk, making me learn to shoot a gun. I didn't want to. He forced me. Then Bill was twirling the gun around, giving me commands on what to do. He gave me a command, and I got scared and pulled the trigger. That's how it happened." After these words, the stranger dropped her hands. The stick fell to the ground from her hands. The girl looked pitifully at Amanda and wandered away in an unknown direction. Amanda didn't wait for the funeral to end either, and before anyone noticed her, walked back home. She was now living with her parents, as her mother-in-law had kicked her out of the house she had bought during the marriage. She didn't want to return to the house where she had caused the death of a man, even if without direct intent. Anyway, at home, Amanda was afraid even of her own shadow. She waited for the verdict of the court. The trial did not last long. because for both the investigation and the court, everything was obvious. Brown's family was very rich. Grief-stricken Bill's family did everything to make sure that his daughter-in-law got a real term, and even her pregnancy did not stop them. As a result, Amanda ended up in a correctional institution at which a children's home was organized, where pregnant and nursing convicts were kept. But apparently this child was not destined to see the light of day. Amanda had a miscarriage, and soon after a short stay in the infirmary, she was transferred to a regular barracks. There Amanda served the monotonous gray days of her imprisonment. 3 years later, a very different Amanda was released. Not that naive girl, but a woman who was wise to her troubles, cynical and self-aware. Fortunately, she was not alone in this life. She had parents who not only did not turn away from their daughter, despite the public censure, but also supported her in every possible way. They were also well-to-do people, so they were able to agree with the head of the colony that Amanda would be looked after during her court-ordered term of imprisonment. The lawyer presented the head of the colony with a thank you note from her parents, and he promised the convict his personal patronage. As Amanda walked out of the gates of the penitentiary, she turned around to take one last look at the place where she had spent the last 3 years. "Goodbye," she said to the female officers on duty at the entrance. "That don't you dare speak," one of them said. "Goodbye." Amanda crossed the threshold of the checkpoint and squinted her eyes against the blindingly bright light. There was hardly any direct sunlight in the barracks, and the walks were no more than an hour a day. As a result, her eyes had gotten used to the daylight willy-nilly. As Amanda got a little more accustomed to the bright sun, she took in the sight of 2 human figures standing alone on the curb across the street from her. They were her parents. God knows how long they had been standing here waiting for her to come out. Even Amanda herself didn't know the exact time when the procedure would end. "Amanda. Daughter, how did you lose so much weight behind bars?" Deborah was like hugging a dried-up chicken. "What did those monsters do to you? I can't even look at you without crying. What did we pay the warden for? He's probably embezzling food at our expense. Daughter, you need to get better, and we'll take you abroad to the best specialists right away," Dustin added. Even he had tears in his eyes at the sight of the haggard face of his little princess, as he always called her. But what foreign country could there be now? Amanda answered her parents sadly, looking at them furtively, like a hunted animal. "I need to get used to normal life first." Amanda wanted to wander the streets of her hometown at least a little, to breathe the air of freedom, to get used to society and the eternal bustle of the city. After the measured, monotonous existence in the prison walls, she definitely needed rehabilitation and social adaptation. Her parents offered to accompany her, but Amanda refused. "If you patronize me everywhere like a child, I will never return to a normal, independent life," she said reproachfully. "Let the mother go." Dustin supported her and put his hand on Deborah's shoulder. Deborah looked at her husband with incredible sadness in her eyes, but remained silent. And so Amanda took timid steps into her once hometown, cautiously, as if an astronaut who had just stepped onto an unknown planet. A lot had changed in 3 years, and she no longer recognized the streets where she had walked yesterday. Life behind the barbed wire had not stood still. It had stopped flowing only for her and the other prisoners, having fallen out of the mainstream for only 3 years. Amanda realized she was already struggling to fit in. There were strangers rushing around, not caring about the problems of their neighbors. And Amanda was like a wild animal that had been locked up for a long time, and now decided to go free. After wandering around, Amanda decided to go to the mall to update her closet. She had really lost a lot of weight before going to juvie, and her old clothes were now hanging on her like a hanger. As she entered the store, Amanda caught a glimpse of a woman wearing large sunglasses who pretended to look in the window. When Amanda turned her head in her direction, she thought it was not the first time she had seen her today. In the store, Amanda walked between the rows of clothes, looking for something suitable for her trip abroad. Amanda didn't know what was in fashion, since it was very difficult to keep track of fashion trends from prison. All the prisoners there wore robes that they sewed themselves. The girl consultant looked at the customer who was timidly looking at the latest collection of clothes. Now in Amanda, it was difficult to suspect a potential client of an expensive boutique, but the saleswoman's eye determined that she was a visitor, even if not ultra-fashionable, but very inexpensive clothes. Especially natural fur coat, which, although it was a little big, but clearly not from someone else's shoulder. Tastefully chosen branded shoes and a handbag from the collection of the past 5 years finally convinced her of the client's solvency, and she, putting on a smile, approached Amanda. "Mitzi, can I help you, young lady?" the saleswoman asked. "Yes, I guess so," Amanda said happily. Previously, the helpfulness and intrusiveness of salespeople had only annoyed her. I can tell you which outfits are the most popular right now. Or are you looking for something specific? The sales assistant asked. I'm going on a trip abroad and I don't want to look ridiculous, Amanda replied. Can you find me a closet for everyday outings? I will buy the rest on the spot. So what country are you going to? If it's not a secret. I don't think I'm nosy. It's just that in Europe one thing is in fashion now, and in Asian countries, for example, they wear something a little different, said the saleswoman. I'm going to Israel. Amanda was happy. But then everything is much simpler. The women there don't care much about fashion. They are very fond of things made of natural fabrics. Many of them prefer country-style clothes. The main thing is that everything in the closet was as comfortable as possible. The consultant picked out the most suitable things, in her opinion, and handed them to Amanda to try on. Amanda was about to go to the fitting room, and then, casually glancing at the transparent street window, she saw the strange woman in dark glasses again. She was clearly watching her. This was beginning to make Amanda tense. She went into the fitting room, but her thoughts kept returning to the stranger who was clearly stalking her. Amanda's mood faded and her desire to choose clothes vanished. Apologizing to the consultant, she hurried out of the boutique. On the way out, Amanda noticed a familiar female silhouette darting over the ledge. She pretended not to notice the woman following her and walked past her as if nothing had happened. But when she reached the first corner, she turned sharply around the corner. There, hiding behind the ledge of the shopping center, Amanda waited for her pursuer. She didn't wait long. In a couple of minutes, the same stranger in big glasses appeared and looked around confused. Amanda jumped out of her hiding place and grabbed the stranger's arm before she could realize anything. Why have you been following me around all day? What do you want from me? Amanda asked. When she finally got a closer look at the woman, she realized who was standing in front of her. It was her husband Bill's mistress who had attacked her at his funeral. Damn murderer, Amanda exclaimed. My Bill's been rotting in the ground for 3 years, and you're already walking around free and going to boutiques. Where's the justice in that? Young lady, I already explained everything to you on the day of Bill's funeral. The woman replied. I thought you understood. I had to take revenge. It's my moral obligation to Bill. I watched you all day, waiting for the right moment, but I didn't have the guts. She cried. Bill and I loved each other so much, but his parents thought me. A girl from a dysfunctional family was no match for their son and forced me to marry you. Bill told me you were the daughter of a friend of his father's in the business. And by the way, I had a son after Bill died. You have a son by Bill? Amanda asked in a low voice, remembering her unborn child. I do, the stranger replied bitterly. And it's very hard to support him alone. Amanda, who herself had lost a child and didn't really love her ex-husband that much, as she had already realized in the zone, felt sorry for the woman. Suddenly, Amanda felt sorry for her former rival. I don't think we have anything to share with you anymore, she summarized. What's your name? We've been through so much together, and we still haven't met. My name is Kayla, the woman answered. And you must be Amanda, but you probably know that already, since Bill, unlike me, must have shared information with you. Yeah, he told me about you, Amanda nodded. Kayla, look, I'm leaving here soon anyway, and you've got a baby on the way. It's kind of indirectly my fault that he's growing up without a father. Can you please take this money? It's all I have on me right now. I'll give you more after the trip and take my fur coat too. Yours probably won't keep the boy warm at all. It won't stand the harsh frosts. With these words, Amanda pulled off her expensive coat, which reminded her too much of the past. Oh, come on. Why? I can't accept it. It's a very expensive thing, Kayla, trying to keep her pride intact, retorted. Bill gave it to me once, so I guess you have more right to it than I do, Amanda said. Kayla looked at the coat with different eyes now, as if a piece of Bill was still on it. She timidly took the gift with trembling hands. What about you without outerwear? It's winter, she worried. I've already called a cab. It'll be here soon, so don't worry about me. You better give me your phone number. When I get back from my trip, I will definitely visit you and the baby. The women exchanged phone numbers and parted almost as friends. Here's my cab, Amanda said, and waved goodbye to Kayla. A couple of days later, her parents took Amanda to Los Angeles to rest and improve her health. They had friends there, so she could stay with them and visit old friends. Amanda, the California climate will be good for you, her mother urged her. There's the Pacific Ocean. You can choose what you want. And if you get tired of the sea, you can often sunbathe on the beach by the lake. And the doctors here are among the best, continued to convince her mother. They'll put you back on your feet in no time. Of course, February is not the best month for swimming, but the resorts of the Pacific Ocean are available all year round. And if you stay here longer, we can enjoy our vacation in Los Angeles to the fullest. We're already here. Do you really think I'm running away from here? Amanda was surprised at her mother's stubbornness. You might not run away, but you could spend the whole day in your room, refusing to go to the beach, she argued. And you need to breathe fresh sea air, to be in the sun more, to get rid of this pale complexion at last. My face is fine, Amanda tried to object. Have you looked at yourself in the mirror? Her mother persisted. Daughter, start. Look, I read in a magazine that you should drink carrot juice to get an even and beautiful tan. I have already agreed in the kitchen at the local restaurant you and I will cook carrot juice every morning. Dad doesn't want to get a tan, so he'll do without the carrot juice. But you and I will have some. Isn't that a good drink, sweetie? Just don't lecture me anymore, Amanda gave in. She followed all the doctor's recommendations, and after a month she was really transformed. Now in this breathing, healthy, beautiful, well-groomed girl was unrecognizable, yesterday's prisoner. But all good things usually come to an end quickly. And so this fabulous vacation came to an end. Dad's business required his presence, and the whole family had to move back to LA. Oh my God, we're finally home, Amanda exhaled. It's nice to be home. But you have to admit, it's better at home, daughter, her mother smiled. If it hadn't been for Dad's business, we would have stayed there for a couple more months. But alas, your father is a very busy man, and we can't stay in a foreign country without him for long, and we can't leave my father alone. You know he has a heart condition. You never know. Mom, don't make excuses, Amanda stopped her. I'm tired of this vacation and endless doctor's recommendations. Her father left right away, and while her mother did the chores, Amanda decided to look at the news feed. Nothing much had happened in the past month. The town had had a few power outages, and twice the water had been turned off. There had been a major sewer break once, just normal city life. Amanda was about to close the laptop, but then out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a strange photograph. It showed the body of a woman whose face was not visible, but what caught Amanda's attention was the painfully familiar fur coat. Oh my God, that's the same Kayla who gave me her coat, Amanda gasped as she ran her eyes over the news article and covered her face with her hands. The news report stated that a week ago, unknown assailants had robbed Kayla Brown, hitting her in the head with something heavy. The woman died at the scene from a head injury she sustained. Police have appealed for anyone who knows anything about the case to come forward. She has a baby, Amanda mumbled. She didn't sleep well last night. All night long she had nightmares. Strange images appeared before her, tormenting her mind. She periodically woke up in a cold sweat and was relieved to realize that it was only a terrible dream. In the morning, barely able to clean herself up after a sleepless night, Amanda decided to go to the police to find out the details of Kayla's death and to inquire about the fate of her baby. In the stuffy office, a middle-aged man in civilian clothes sat behind a desk. It was an investigator. This was where the Kayla Brown murder case was being investigated. Amanda had been told about it by the police. "What do you got?" The investigator asked gruffly. "Do you have something important to report?" "Hello, the thing is, I knew the deceased. Not close, of course, but I had a couple of conversations with her, and I gave her the fur coat she was found in," Amanda said. "When I saw that picture on the news of Kayla lying face down in my coat, I had the strangest feeling, like I was seeing my own body from behind, lying on the ground." "It's very similar," the investigator said, moving closer. "You say you gave Kayla Brown the coat she was later found dead in?" "Yes," Amanda nodded. "A couple days before I left for Israel for treatment. I was out of town for a month. I just got back from my flight yesterday, and when I was looking at the news, I came across this." Well, the investigator stretched out. "How can you confirm this? Does anyone know that you gave Kayla a fur coat?" "No," Amanda shook her head. "Not unless my mom did. I went shopping that day and came back to my parents' house in a cab without the coat. I handed it to Kayla at the mall, took it off and handed it to her. I got into a cab not far from home. My mom wondered where my coat had gone. I had to tell her about the gift." "And what was the need to give a coat to a complete stranger in the middle of the street?" frowned the investigator. "For you to understand what I did, I'll probably have to tell you the whole story of how I met Kayla from the beginning," Amanda sighed. "You're the only person who can shed any light on this murder so far," the investigator said. "To be honest, there are some things I don't agree with from the beginning. As we found out, the deceased Kayla Brown was not a woman of means. In fact, she was barely making ends meet. All of a sudden, this expensive fur coat. She was attacked, presumably for robbery, but they didn't take the expensive coat, and she had nothing in her purse anyway. So come on, tell me how, where, and under what circumstances did you meet Kayla? Every detail can be helpful. I met her 3 years ago at my husband Bill's funeral, Amanda began. Amanda flinched. Someone hit me in the back with a stick. I turned around and saw Kayla. I didn't know her name at the time. She tried to hit me again, but I dodged. Then I found out she was my dead husband's mistress, or rather, she was his fiancée, whom he really loved, unlike me. His parents married him to me, but I didn't find that out until after my husband died from Kayla. And why did Kayla attack you with sticks? The coroner asked. She blamed me for Bill's death and wanted revenge, Amanda replied. Did I have anything to do with his death? Amanda lowered her gaze. I served 3 years for manslaughter. My husband was drunk. That night he made me learn how to shoot a gun. He twirled the barrel while the gun was in my hands and yelled at me to get a better grip on the gun, to learn how to pull some on. I was very nervous, and with a fright I accidentally pulled the trigger, and the barrel was pointed at him at the time. Bill died instantly. And after that everyone cursed me, his parents, his friends, and the mistress I found out about at the funeral. So your husband's parents also wished you dead, surprised the investigator. Yes, in court they shouted that 3 years for the murder of their son was too little, and they wanted me to die in prison. And if I tried to get out, they promised to do justice on their own and send me after Bill. So they threatened you. I can understand them, Amanda sighed, her eyes downcast. After all, my only son is dead, and as hard as it is for me to admit it, I had something to do with his death. But why did you decide to give the coat to Kayla after she tried to kill you? It's kind of a weird thing to do. Kayla was following me that day, but I spotted her following me, so I stalked her outside the mall. She admitted that she wanted to get back at me for Bill's death, but she didn't go through with it. Then Kayla cried and told me how much she and Bill loved each other, and that she had a son after he died and had to raise him alone. I felt sorry for her and the baby, and I wanted to do something for them. I gave away all the money I had on me, and that fur coat. Bill had given it to me anyway. It was hard for me to look at it because of the memories. So you're saying that when you saw the photo of the murdered woman dressed in your coat, you felt uncomfortable because from behind Kayla looked like you in the case? The investigator asked. Yes, that's right, Amanda nodded. And if someone were shown a picture of me in that coat, would they mistake me for Kayla? I don't know. I guess if it looked like you from behind, I guess they could have, the investigator replied. Why are you asking me that? Do you think your attacker mistook you for Kayla? I didn't say that. You said it yourself, he objected. Now think about it. Was there anyone besides Kayla who was murdered who wanted you dead? Amanda lowered her gaze. Bill's parents had uttered threats and curses, but that's not serious, is it? It doesn't really count. The investigator stared at her in silence. Why don't you say anything? Amanda asked without waiting for an answer. Let's not jump to conclusions. I will check the information you have provided and contact you if necessary. And if you remember anything or find out anything, call me. The investigator handed her a business card. Here's my phone number. Call me at any time. Don't hesitate. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you for your information. Amanda left the investigative committee building with strange feelings. She had a haunting thought in her head. What if Kayla's death and her coat had something to do with their similarities? It's not a coincidence at all. If it is, then the perpetrator, having found out he was mistakenly targeted, may now be waiting around the corner somewhere for me too. Once home, Amanda began to frantically recall the events before she left for Israel. Amanda couldn't remember anything unusual, except her meeting with Kayla, but she now saw the incident in prison from a completely different perspective. When she was pregnant, she had been attacked in the shower room by 2 cellmates. They brutally beat her, after which Amanda lost the baby. No one punished her attackers, even though she pointed them out. And in the infirmary after the miscarriage and cleanup, when Amanda cried and wailed, Lord, why are you punishing me? Have I sinned so badly that even here you will continue to punish me? A passing doctor suddenly said, It is not God who is punishing you. God is too busy with his universal affairs to pay attention to pathetic people. He is deaf to our prayers. That's why people are forced to restore justice on their own. You got the punishment you deserve. You hurt people. You pay the price. What are you talking about? Who did I hurt? Amanda was surprised. I'm already paying for a stupid accident, a stolen human life, and my parents' grief. You're going to pay for a ridiculous 3 years in prison, the doctor said. It's not enough what happened to you. You should have died with your brood. Then the parents of the boy you killed would have some peace of mind. At the time, Amanda had thought the doctor was just being sympathetic to Bill's parents' grief, but now she wondered about the real reasons for this strange behavior. I didn't do anything to those women in prison. Why did they beat me up and didn't even say anything? They just beat me silently. They kicked me in the stomach on purpose. Who could have interfered with my child, she pondered. All roads led back to Bill's parents. If she got it right, the baby was a potential heir, not only after Bill's death, but also after his parents' deaths. But did they really have a hand up their own grandson? Amanda was horrified. We need to consult someone to untangle this tangle. With these thoughts in mind, Amanda left the house and headed to the notary. Since she hadn't signed up in advance, she had to wait in a long line. But Amanda was already determined to find out everything as soon as possible, so she bravely endured all the hardships of the notary. After a couple hours, it was finally her turn. She entered the notary's office. Behind a massive oak desk sat a man who was tired by this time and did not hide his irritation. "What is the matter?" he asked sharply, without looking up at Amanda. "I would like to consult," the visitor answered timidly. "But if you're here, consult. What exactly is your question?" "You see, my husband Bill died 3 years ago. I did not inherit, but I was pregnant by him at the time of his death. The baby was never born. I wanted to know if my child would have been entitled to anything if it had been born." "Why ask about something that will never happen?" The notary brushed it off. "As a matter of fact, there is no child now. Accordingly, what does it matter what would have happened if he were alive? If only." "Understand that this is very important," Amanda patiently objected. "The fact is that I lost my child for a reason. I was brutally beaten, kicked in the stomach. I suspect it was done purposefully to get rid of a potential heir. So I wanted to find out what my child could possibly be entitled to, and could this have been the cause of his death? Please help me figure this out." "Yes. I see that the case is really serious and complicated," sighed the notary. "Do you have any documents about your husband's death?" "I only have a certificate from the registry office. They said that the certificate of dissolution of marriage in this case is not issued. Bill's parents got the death certificate. They handled the funeral." "All right, let's get what we got. Let's check the probate registry. It's going to take a while. The internet's slow today, and the databases are taking a long time to load. So it's out of my hands." "Yeah, you're lucky you got a fast download," said the notary. "Bill, there is one." He carefully began to study the contents of the inheritance file, and after a few minutes of concentrated reading turned a surprised face to the visitor. "You are right in your suspicions," he told Amanda. "They could have gotten rid not only of the unborn child, but also of you. Did you know that you were also an heiress, since your husband had no will? Your husband Bill was a very wealthy man. Not only did he have the usual real estate and other assets, but he owned several financial companies. I'm guessing someone didn't want to give them to you. Why didn't you inherit within the statutory period?" "I couldn't," Amanda mumbled, nervously tugging at the strap of her bag. "Were you in the hospital?" suggested the notary. "I was serving time in a penal colony for the manslaughter of my husband," Amanda exhaled, and she felt better after hearing the truth. "What a twist." The notary leaned back in his chair. "And how long have you been out of the colony?" "A little over a month ago." "So you should then urgently apply to the court with a petition to restore the missed period of entry into the inheritance due to the rents. This is given 6 months after the grounds preventing the entry into the inheritance no longer exist. So we advise you do not delay with this case, and in the near future submit an application. Attach a certificate from the penitentiary to the application." "Thank you very much," Amanda thanked the notary. "You're welcome. I hope that our fears will not be confirmed, and that you will not be in danger after submitting this application. Good luck to you." Amanda walked out of the notary's office with a trembling, excitement-seeking heart. The sun had already completed its daily run across the sky, and it was getting dark outside. It was the end of March, so it was getting dark early. "What am I going to do now?" Amanda thought. "If it really is all about that damned inheritance." She dug into her bag and pulled out the investigator's business card from there. Amanda remembered that the investigator had said to let her know if any new information came up. She dialed the number on the card. The phone rang with a long beep. A few seconds later, an angry male voice answered. "Yes, go ahead," he said. "Hello, it's Amanda. Remember I came to see you yesterday about Kayla Brown and her fur coat?" The caller recalled her recent visit. "Yes, of course I remember." The investigator's voice warmed noticeably. "Did something happen to you?" "I just came from the notary. He said I can still claim the inheritance from my husband Bill's death." And there's a lot of property there, including whole companies. The notary said that this could very well be the motive for the assassination attempt. So get back to the notary's office immediately and don't leave. Call a cab and come to me immediately. I don't talk to anyone and don't move until the cab arrives. On the way, don't call or pick up anyone. Do you understand me? Your life is in grave danger. I'm absolutely sure of that now. Amanda followed the investigator's instructions exactly, and in half an hour she was back in his office. Amanda, in all likelihood your parents-in-law have put a decent bounty on your head, the investigator said, and they probably know by now that the previous assassination attempt was a complete failure. I doubt that will stop them. But while the investigation into Caleb Brown's murder is ongoing, they may be laying low for a while, so we're going to have to bait them. How? Amanda asked in surprise, not yet realizing what the investigator was suggesting. The notary advised you to apply for reinstatement of the inheritance. Is that correct? Yes, Amanda confirmed. File it, and not only do it, but notify your in-laws, so we know they've gotten the information they need. But that could provoke them. Amanda was frightened, realizing where the investigator was going with this. Right, he nodded. That's the idea, the investigator nodded. We need to provoke them. If they really were trying to kill you but mistook you for Kayla because of the fur coat you gave her, then this is our chance to catch them red-handed and put them away for a long time. That's the only way you'll be safe. You know what I'm talking about. I think so, don't you? Amanda answered uncertainly. Good, I will introduce you to operatives from tomorrow. They'll be watching you at all times, so don't worry about that. But please, even if you find yourself being followed, ignore them and pretend you don't notice anything. Is that a deal? Yes. Now call a cab again. And don't go anywhere until I call you. Tomorrow I'll let you know when you need to leave the house to file your application. While you're at home, get all the necessary paperwork ready. Okay, Amanda nodded. Her heart was pounding like a frightened rabbit, but she knew she had to do something to avoid living the rest of her life in fear. Waiting for someone to hit her over the head with a heavy weapon like Kayla, she hailed a cab and drove home. Amanda didn't say anything to her parents so as not to scare them. After calming down a bit, she went to the district court website. There she found the necessary application template and printed it out. Her father had all the necessary office equipment in his office. After filling out the form and making copies of the attached documents, Amanda took a breath. Now all that was left to do was wait for the investigator to call. She already had everything ready for the next step. That night, Amanda slept restlessly again. The nightmares never stopped haunting her. This time she dreamt of Kayla. She stood in the middle of some dark room, pale as death, and stared frighteningly at Amanda without saying anything. Suddenly some black shadows appeared and dragged a scared-to-death Kayla somewhere. She clung desperately to anything she could get her hands on, breaking her bloody fingernails. And Amanda heard her heartbreaking scream. Son. At that moment, Amanda finally managed to overcome the obsession and jumped up as if she had just witnessed the nightmarish events in her dream. Her heart was racing again, she was short of breath, and a cold, clammy sweat broke out on her forehead. Oh God, Kayla really did have a little boy. I completely forgot about him and all the commotion, Amanda thought as she looked at her watch. It was 3:15 in the morning. I'm not going to get any more sleep after that nap. I better make some coffee, she muttered, and headed for the kitchen. The coffee finally chased away the remnants of sleep, and her head felt clearer. Amanda shook off the memories of the nightmare and went to get ready for a new day. You gotta be ready. Who knows when the investigator will call, she reasoned. Amanda was not wrong in her calculations. Being a man, the investigator was not going to get into the female nuances of the necessary preparation for going out. At 8:00, the phone rang. Of course, it was him. Hello? Amanda answered. Hi, this is Detective Brown. I already have your number on file. Yesterday I made all the necessary paperwork, and today you are already assigned to operatives. You can go to court first thing in the morning. I don't think there's a minute to lose. Every delay is a new opportunity for those who are hunting you now. We don't know yet if your in-laws attacked Kayla or if they hired someone, so be careful and remember all my instructions. Typical man, Amanda thought to herself and hung up the phone. A good thing I woke up from this nightmare at 3 a.m. and had time to clean myself up. Otherwise, I'd have to explain to the investigator why I couldn't go to court this morning. Even yesterday, Amanda had familiarized herself with the district court schedule. They opened at 9:00, so with the drive, it was a good time to leave the house. Amanda waited in another line, now in the reception area of the court. and sighed with relief when the bureaucratic procedure of filing one single piece of paper, which had caused her to sit so long in the general line in the court corridor, was finally over. On her way out, she sent a quick message to the investigator via messenger. Statement filed. On my way home. A minute later, she got a reply. Great, take a cab home. And from home write to your mother-in-law and inform her that the term of entry into the inheritance is restored. As you write, send me a screenshot of your message. And if then you get a response, it is also a screen, and forward everything to me. Amanda made it home safely. Despite the police officers assigned to her, she was still haunted by the feeling of fear that had haunted her since the night before. Now that Amanda knew that her mother-in-law might have been involved in Kayla's murder, and that Amanda, not she, should have been their victim, she was having periodic panic attacks. Her heart was pounding desperately in her chest because of its frantic rhythm, and the oxygen wasn't getting to her brain in the right amount, making her short of breath and dizzy. I had to stop and catch air with my mouth, like a fish thrown on the shore. After taking a sedative, Amanda texted her mother-in-law. Hello Grace, this is Amanda, notifying you that I have applied for reinstatement of my inheritance. I hope this doesn't cause any problems. Amanda took a screenshot of her smartphone screen with this message and immediately forwarded it to the investigator. About 10 minutes later, the phone vibrated, notifying her of the incoming message. The mother-in-law couldn't take it anymore. The messenger reflected a whole tirade of her fiery speeches. How could you, bitch, have the conscience to do this? It's not enough that my son was murdered, but now you're going to get your hands on our property. You'll never get your inheritance. I'll lay down my bones, but I won't give you a penny. God knows I didn't want this for my son. Who could have known that you would turn out to be such a bastard and kill Bill on purpose so that you could run your bloody paw into our business? Grace screamed. Damn the day, Oliver and I decided to marry Bill to you, so he wouldn't get mixed up with a troublesome wench. And Kayla would have been better off with her by now, so he'd still be alive. And now they're both silent. And maybe they'll be happy in the next world. But you should be rotting in your grave in their place, you bastard. Damn your whole family. They taught you how to inherit your husband's share of the business as soon as he dies. Damn you and your parents to hell. Cursing all of you to the seventh knee, Amanda did not answer anything, just secured the correspondence and sent it to the investigator again. A few minutes later, a reply came back from him. Wonderful. You can see that your mother-in-law is nervous, and she clearly did not like your intention to enter the inheritance. And when a person is very nervous, he begins to think badly and can do something stupid. That's where we're going to catch her. They're already aware of Kayla's death, and there's a circumstantial admission that you should be in Kayla's shoes. What's my next move? Amanda checked with the investigator. Write to your mother-in-law and tell her you'll go to the notary by tomorrow to apply for inheritance. Amanda followed the investigator's instructions. I'm sorry Bill is dead, but he's gone. And you and I are alive, so we can resolve this issue in a civilized manner. Tomorrow I will go to the notary who has the inheritance file to apply for the inheritance. I hope you won't prevent me from doing so. The mother-in-law received the message but did not reply. Amanda woke up the next day, determined. Today would decide her fate, or would she help the investigation catch Kayla's real killers and save her life? Or would it turn out that her mother-in-law had nothing to do with it? I mean, there's a chance it's just an unfortunate coincidence. The investigator instructed Amanda that she should get out of the cab at the beginning of the street and walk to the notary's office. This would increase the chances of the scheme succeeding. Amanda got out of the cab and, barely able to resist the urge to look around for operatives and pursuers, walked to the notary's office. On the way, she had to pass through a small public garden. It was empty and deserted at this time of year. Amanda walked down the alley, straining her hearing. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Amanda tensed up, but she didn't let on, she just picked up her pace. The man walking a little behind her also quickened his pace. Amanda was gripped by a terrible fear. She could no longer resist, absorbed in the noise of her own terror, and almost sprinted. The man behind her was getting closer, but Amanda, acting on the investigator's instructions, didn't turn around. Her nerves gave way. Amanda stopped abruptly. No stranger's footsteps could be heard either. Then she ran and was startled to hear the stomping of feet approaching her. Then she felt a sharp push in her back. Someone attacked her from behind and threw her to the ground. Amanda clung to the ground, squeezed her eyes shut, and clenched into a ball, instinctively covering her head with her hands in anticipation of a blow. But there was none. Then she heard the sound of some kind of commotion. When she opened her eyes, Amanda saw that two young men were twisting a third man who was struggling desperately. Finally, they managed to handcuff him, after which one of them approached Amanda, helped her up from the ground, and said, "Citizen, are you all right?" "I think so," Amanda replied quietly, still reeling from what had happened. "Then you also stay here to testify. We are police officers," explained the guy who addressed her. "This man tried to hit you on the head with this crowbar. We prevented the attempt in time. Now we're going to bring in medics and specialists to examine the scene and remove traces of the crime. And then you'll have to come with us to the station," they told her. "Okay, if you say so," Amanda whispered, pale as death. The paramedics arrived and examined Amanda and noted the marks of her fall to the ground. There were abrasions on her palms and knees. She had rolled across the pavement during her fall to the ground. Her new pantyhose were ruined because they couldn't withstand the bumps in the city asphalt. It was good that her coat was not short, and its flaps could cover her skinned knees, which had been treated by the medical staff with some healing solution. The scratches stung. But Amanda had clearly learned from childhood that wounds should not be touched with hands, even if they itched terribly. After examining the scene, the perpetrator and his victim were loaded into a service vehicle and taken to the nearest police station. Investigator Brown arrived there shortly afterward. He took Amanda aside. "Now our bait has worked. The trap is sprung. Now we're going to find out who's behind this. I bet it's your mother-in-law. They hired this felon, and he's the one who killed Kayla. I don't believe in coincidences like that." "What about the mother-in-law? Won't they be arrested?" Amanda wondered. "Have a little patience. You just want everything at once, like in detective shows. That's not how life works. We've got the perpetrator. He'll lead us to our clients. And when we have a confession from your attacker and your mother-in-law, then it's their turn." Caught red-handed, the perpetrator at first tried to pretend he didn't know what he was suspected of. "Warden, you're insulting me. Why are you trying to pin someone else's case on me? I didn't assault anyone, not now, not ever. It was this citizen who started hurting me out of the blue, tripped and fell. I didn't lay a finger on her," Tyler said. "It was a special operation, and all the events are recorded on video, where you can clearly see how you pushed the victim from behind, and when she fell, swung the crowbar to hit her on the head," the investigator countered. "It was at that moment that our operatives arrived and disarmed you, so it's useless to deny it. We have everything recorded, and we can clearly see your face there," said Investigator Brown. Tyler, who was being questioned, was staring at the operative with his small eyes. It was evident that the criminal brain was now working hard and analyzing the situation. "If you, Tyler, want to get the pike, you need to be friends with us," the operative continued. The suspect immediately tensed up, and although he tried to pretend that he didn't care, it was obvious that he was listening attentively, and the operative continued to process him. "Tell us who ordered the assassination attempt on Citizen Amanda, and you'll be happy. You'll earn yourself bonuses for cooperating with the investigation. And if you remember something else interesting, you might even be a witness in the case. You didn't come up with all this on your own, did you? We're all human beings. We're all driven by necessity. And some rich guy offers to make a quick buck, bash some broad's head in. Who'd turn that down?" The criminal was silent, thinking over the pros and cons. He didn't know what else the police had on him, so he was afraid to blab and say too much. "My patience is not infinite, and the offer is one time, so you don't have much time to think." The operative raised his voice and began to press. "If now you play silent, we will prove your involvement. Believe me, we have enough evidence for that. And then we will calm you down to the fullest, and there will be no leniency for you. So what do you have in mind?" "Dried it up," Warden Tyler said dryly. "Her relatives made it up." "What relatives? Whose?" the investigator interjected. "That won't do. Tell me what you mean. Why do I have to pull every word out of you?" He was indignant. "Tell so that it was clear, and do not pretend, and state everything as it is, as if for the first time handed over the layout. I've already memorized your biography by heart. You're a big name in the criminal world, so don't play innocent." "I was talked out of going after this lady," and her father-in-law Tyler continued. "They said she killed their son and should pay for it." "What exactly did they ask you to do?" Investigator Brown asked. "Get rid of their daughter-in-law by any means necessary." "What is meant by the word get rid of? Did they explain it to you?" "Yeah, I thought maybe just maim her to keep her out of the way. But the woman who talked to me made it clear that she wants to see her sister-in-law in a coffin, and she hopes I will fulfill her request. And she would not be in debt and would generously pay for my services. But they promised to pay the full amount only after the result." "How much did they promise you for such a trifle?" $50,000 at once and another $100,000 later." "And where's the money already?" "I owed child support. I paid some of it, spend some of it on food. What a noble thing to do, said Investigator Brown. You decided to give the money for the murder to the kid. Do you think that's the only way to get God's forgiveness? You don't need to scare God out of me, Warden Tyler snapped. Where was God when I was being beaten mercilessly by my alcoholic stepfather? Why did God let me run away from home to save my own skin? I was raised on the streets. You think I was a criminal from the time I was in diapers? Oh, don't tell me your heartwarming stories. The operative waved away. Many people have a hard life, but only a few become criminals. Those who follow the path of least resistance. It's easier to steal than to make money. Tyler frowned and shut down. The operative, realizing he'd made a mistake, decided to rectify the situation. Sorry, Tyler. It's not your fault. It's just a crazy day. Do you have the coordinates of the customers? I do, the suspect mumbled. You seized my cell phone. All the contacts are there. The operative pulled out the items seized during the personal search. Tyler had an old smartphone with broken glass in the bag. Is this your phone? He asked. Yeah, it's password protected. It doesn't have a function like your customers are recorded, Aunt Anya, the executor, muttered. That's original, the police officer smirked. Operative Brown flipped through the calls, took some notes and pictures. Okay, Tyler, you're done for the day. If you think of anything else, let the duty officer know. Suspect has been taken away. The operative relayed the information to Detective Dustin. A couple hours later, the investigative committee and police cars arrived at Brown's house. Investigator Dustin and 2 police officers cordoned off the building just in case. Dustin went to the front door. The police officers hid themselves so that they could not be seen through the surveillance cameras. But if anyone was watching the image or from the window, these precautions were useless. Dustin rang the doorbell. A dog barked in the yard, but the house showed no signs of life. The investigator rang it again. Young man, we're not going to buy anything from you, and we're not going to join any cults. Go away with God, a woman's voice came through the intercom. Grace, open up, please. I'm from the investigative committee. There are new developments in your son's murder case. I need to talk to you about it. There was silence. But after a few seconds, the electronic lock clicked, announcing that the door had opened. Dustin, followed by the 2 policemen, walked through the yard to the barking of the yard dog. On the threshold of the house stood the landlady. Her face reflected a look of extreme concern. What is the progress in my son's case? Bill's mother asked anxiously. Did you prove that the bastard shot on purpose? Not exactly. But you're very close to the truth, Dustin replied. Where's your husband? Why do you need him? Grace was wary. I don't want to repeat the same information twice. It would be better if you called him, and then we could tell you both the purpose of our visit. He's in the kitchen. I'll go get him. The landlady disappeared into the back of the room and returned a moment later, accompanied by her husband. Grace and Oliver Brown, said Investigator Dustin. Yes, the owners of the house confirmed with one voice. You are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder of Amanda Brown, they said in words that Grace and Oliver did not understand. The police handcuffed them and led them out of the house, putting them separately into 2 different service vehicles parked nearby, so that the suspects could not talk to each other about anything on the way. They were also questioned separately. Grace, your husband has already confessed, so there's no use in denying it, Dustin told the suspect after another one of her excuses. Moreover, your accomplice Tyler had ratted you both out earlier, so we have more than enough evidence to prove your guilt. I just feel sorry for you as a human being. As a mother, I know exactly what you're going through. My mom would cut anyone's throat for me too, so I'd like to do something to help you. But you're stubborn, and you're doing your own time with your lies. Son, if you understand, then why did you arrest me? Why don't you say anything? It's not my fault. Of course you are not guilty, nodded the investigator. Without you, I got you confused and led you astray. Repent, and you'll feel better immediately. Is that the price of a traffic accident? Sins to God and the priest. And here there is neither, answered Grace, still hoping to get away with it. The coroner is better off than any priest. He can repent of anything, especially if it's a felony. Grace, for the last time, I suggest you don't make things worse and come clean like your husband did. Otherwise, you will not see him again soon, because he will get the minimum penalty and you will get the maximum. Because of your age, you won't be able to go free, except with your feet in front of you. Would your son want that for his mother? Why don't you give him any peace even in the afterlife? Grace could not bear it and cried. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed loudly. My son, on whom did you leave me and my father? Is there no world for us now that you are gone? Grace, drink some water, the investigator suggested, holding out a glass of water to the suspect. Grace drank the water and kept quiet. Grace, if you're not cooperating, then I'm going to have to confront you, Brown said. The investigator called someone on the phone, and in 5 minutes Amanda entered the office. What's that bastard doing here? The suspect immediately lost her composure. I warned you. Grace, you didn't want to cooperate with the investigation, so we're forced to resort to additional means of extracting evidence. There will now be a confrontation between you and the victim, the investigator reminded us. Who's the victim here? She's the victim, Grace shrieked. Yes, I'm the one who suffered at the hands of this murderer. My husband and I should be recognized as victims, and that bastard should be put away for life. He shouldn't be allowed to walk the earth and smoke the light of day. Grace, I must ask you to refrain from insulting me, said Brown. I understand you know a citizen named Amanda Brown. That bitch still hasn't changed her last name, the mother-in-law boiled again. How the hell do you do it? She killed my son to put her filthy hand in our family fortune, and you have the nerve to use his last name after his murder. Grace, please calm down, Brown asked her. Do you have it on record, Mr. Investigator? The suspect addressed him. I demand that she be deprived of the right to bear my deceased son's surname. She has no right to bear his surname after what she did to him. But you know what that bitch did. She shot him point blank with a shotgun, and then said it was an accident, and she only got 3 years for cold-blooded, premeditated murder. What's 3 years for the life of a young guy who had everything ahead of him? We don't have that kind of authority. If you think she doesn't have the right to carry your son's last name, go to court, Brown said. There's another issue at stake here. You say you never threatened your daughter-in-law. That's not what she's saying, and even showed screenshots of your correspondence with her where you cursing her, saying that in the place of Kayla Brown and your son in the grave should rot in the grave Amanda. By the way, how did you know Kayla Brown was dead? I don't remember. I think it was in the papers, the suspect replied in a panic. What about the threats against Amanda? Don't call her that, the suspect whispered. Okay, what about the threats against Amanda Brown? I have every right to do that after she took my son from me. What, now a mother can't even threaten her son's killer if the state can't deliver justice? But you've gone much farther in your search for justice, haven't you? The investigator noted. Tyler told us how he mistakenly killed another woman because of you. He's very angry with you, because now instead of 1 crime, he's got 2 murders and an attempted murder. You could have given us a better picture so we wouldn't have to identify the target by his fur coat. You didn't think of that. How could they not? We thought of everything, but the fur coat was a bust, said the suspect. Who made stupid Kayla wear that damn coat that day? It was her own fault. If she hadn't, she'd be alive right now. I didn't tell you it was about Kayla, the investigator said. Well, now that you're being honest, I'll tell you a secret. We found the cabin where Kayla Brown was killed. Tyler wasn't smart enough to change the weapon, so he followed Amanda with the same shotgun Mike used. And our forensics found traces of DNA on it belonging to Kayla Brown and, of course, Tyler's handprints and DNA. We also have his confession, including evidence against you and your husband Brown, continued. It was you he named as the person who ordered the murder of Amanda Brown, and it was you who gave him the wrong tip-off by poorly describing the alleged victim and giving a photo of her wearing the same fur coat that was later found on the murdered Kayla Brown. Anything to add or object? Grace remained silent, only occasionally casting angry glances at either the investigator or her sister-in-law. Grace, have you been proven guilty yet? Brown asked. We have already collected the necessary materials in a sufficient volume for the court, so our conversations are more moral than legal. The suspect shifted her gaze to Oliver Brown. You do not hide your hatred for the victim, continued the investigator, are sure that she is guilty of the death of your son, and that she did it deliberately, out of selfish motives, in order to gain possession of your family fortune. So the motive is clear. The accomplices, including your husband, have confessed, willingly cooperated with the investigation, and point to you as the main initiator of this atrocity, so the court will have no doubt of your guilt. And your husband, Grace asked. Your feeling is that he is old, so he will serve his 3 years and go free with a clear conscience. And so Bill won't have to forge on a loan while you're in the dungeons praying, so he'll get himself a young woman. And it was worth it to be so angry at your daughter-in-law, so that then 10 years to trample the zone and lose her husband. Brown grinned. It was worth it, Grace said. If I had to, I'd do a lot more than that for my son. That bastard shouldn't live after what she's done. And if neither the court of earth nor the court of God wants to get involved, then I've been doing it myself. With these words, Grace jumped up with incredible agility for a woman of her age and threw herself at Amanda like an angry cat protecting kittens. The investigator barely had time to run up to unhook her from Amanda. The suspect fought back violently. They had to call an escort because Oliver couldn't handle this woman who seemed to be off the chain. The distraught women fought to the death. The medics arrived and found numerous abrasions not only on Amanda, but also on Investigator Brown. Grace's nail layer was removed and her broken nails were photographed, which she had damaged in a desperate attempt to scratch out the eyes of her hated sister-in-law. The incident that took place only added to the guilt of the icy mother-in-law. She eventually gave up under the weight of the charges and confessed to everything. The investigator summoned Amanda to inform her that the case file has been submitted to the court. "Well, that's it," Brown said. "Amanda Brown, I have done everything in my power to ensure that the guilty do not escape responsibility. It's up to the court and the prosecutor's office to take it from here." "Thank you so much," Amanda replied. "You've done more for me than anyone I've ever known in my entire life, and Kayla can rest in peace now. Her killers will now receive the punishment they deserve. By the way, do you know what happened to her baby? She had a young son, no more than 3.5 years old." Yes, of course," Brown nodded. "I remember when we found Kayla Brown's body. She had a passport with a stamp on it that said she had a minor child. That's how we found out about the kid. Thank God he wasn't alone for long." The door was opened, and in the presence of witnesses and guardianship authorities, the baby was taken first to the hospital. And then the guardianship authorities took him away. "I don't know where to, but I can ask the Juvenile Affairs Department. They cooperate with the guardianship authorities." "Please find out if it's not too much trouble," Amanda asked. "The thing is, this kid is my late husband Bill's son. If he has no other relatives, I want to take care of him. I promised his mother Kayla." "I understand," the investigator nodded. "It's a guilty conscience. After all, you are indirectly responsible for the death of both his parents. What a strange fate for this child." Brown called the juvenile department, and within 10 minutes he had the address of the orphanage where little Tyler Brown had been sent. "Wow, Kayla didn't tell me she named her son after Bill," Amanda remarked. Sometime later, Amanda and her mother Grace came to the orphanage to meet Kayla's son. The caregivers brought the toddler into the director's office. He shrank fearfully toward the woman who had brought him to the orphanage and peered warily with his big blue eyes and thick eyelashes at the strange women. Amanda looked at the baby and her heart squeezed. She had seen baby pictures of her husband Bill. The baby holding on to the caregiver looked like 2 drops of water, like her late husband. "That's our Tyler Brown," said the director of the orphanage, smiling. "We don't usually show the children separately. We have an open house and a database for that, but this is a special case. Our people are superstitious." Someone quickly spread information about the tragic death of his biological mother. "They're telling all sorts of stories, like his own grandmother hired a hitman, and he mistakenly killed her daughter-in-law instead of the real one. And the rest of the story is crazy. How can people think of such things? The grandmother allegedly wanted revenge on her daughter-in-law for killing her son, and this son was forcibly married by his parents. And when his wife was alive, he ran to another wife, who then gave birth to our Tyler, and the wife found out about it and killed the traitor with a shotgun. Can you imagine what people make up?" "Yeah, they make up all sorts of stories," Amanda agreed and looked at Grace's mother. "And the poor kid can't find a family because of all the gossip around his relatives," the director of the social institution lamented. "As soon as they find out his personal data, everyone starts asking if this is not the same Brown, whose son killed her mother-in-law with the help of a killer. And it just goes on and on. I don't know what to do about it anymore. You could change the kid's last name." "I don't need to change anything," Amanda said firmly. "I'm going to adopt this boy. Please prepare me a list of documents that I must submit with the application." "You want to adopt him right away?" the director asked. "How about a temporary guardianship to start with? Or a foster family? It often happens that people take a child, and then they are disappointed and want to return it." "But canceling guardianship is one thing," the director said. "Adoption is a lot more complicated." "I'm not going to revoke the adoption," Amanda said firmly. "I knew both his parents well. That's why I'm not afraid of the rumors floating around about this baby, nor of any difficulties with his upbringing. Raising him is my moral obligation to his parents." The director looked into the eyes of this confident and well-to-do woman. She realized that little Tyler would be in good hands, and since the adoptee knew his parents personally, there was no better guardian for him. Meanwhile, Amanda wasted no time. She restored the term for the entry into the inheritance and formalized the inheritance share due to her under the law, which by its scope of property rights allowed her and her baby to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. While the inheritance and adoption were being processed, The court sentenced Tyler Brown and the Oliver couple. The first really got a break for active assistance to the investigation, and he was given 5 years in a penal colony of general regime. But the Olivers were not helped by their loud statements at the trial about the case of honor and revenge for the murdered son. The court did not consider it a mitigating circumstance, and it was not a state of effect either. As a result, both received 10 years each in a general regime colony. So justice, which they both advocated for, did prevail. Amanda, leaving little Tyler, his real name Brown, took him to Miami, where there was a lot of sun and a lot of sea resorts for every taste. They settled into a small villa on the beach and gratefully greeted each new morning. Breakfast, flowers, grapes on the veranda, Amanda said. Eat your fruit, Tyler, and get your strength back. You and I have great things ahead of us. You're going to grow up to be a great man. Maybe you'll become a great surgeon and save lives, or even an astronaut. All doors are open to you, kid, and it's up to you to decide which one you enter. A bankrupt rich man came to visit his mother, who was abandoned in the middle of nowhere 5 years ago. And as he approached, that night, Walter's dreams were so vivid that when he woke up, he thought, "That's it. I'm drunk. I'm hallucinating." His head rattled so much that he had no strength to get out of bed. The man rolled over onto his side with difficulty and slowly got up. There were pills somewhere. He pulled out the nightstand drawer, fumbled inside with his hand to dissolve the pill in a glass of water. Walter drank and lay down again. He dreamt of his father that night. He was angry with his son, swearing and shouting. But what he did to his mother. "You're selfish and mean," his father said. And Walter stood in front of him as he had years before, as a child, and did not look up. "Mother spent her whole life raising you, denied herself an extra dress. And the dream was so explicit that Walter could almost physically feel the slap his father had given him. It was at this moment that his mother had to stand up for her son. She had always protected him from everyone, calmed his father when he was angry, defended him in front of his teachers at school, scolded the neighborhood kids, taking away his bicycle. Where is the mother? His father was getting more and more unruly. He was about to take off his belt and give Walter a beating. But Mum wasn't in the dream. She never came to save her son. And that realization made me feel cold inside. Fear gripped his whole body and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Walter woke up covered in sweat. The man hadn't seen his mother in 5 years. Maybe she's dead, he thought. And that thought made his head crack even harder. Walter slowly looked around the room. Slowly he began to remember everything that had happened the day before. The bailiffs had shown up at the office yesterday with a notice that Walter no longer owned the firm, his accounts were seized, and he had to leave the flat within 10 days. "What the fuck are you guys doing?" Walter raged. "Let's get the hell out of here or I'll call security." The man reached for the phone to dial the number of the head of security, but the uniformed man held out an ordinance to him. "What's this? What are you pulling at me?" "Your paperwork's failing." Walter was confused as he read what was printed on the white sheet of paper. The paper stated that the new owner of the firm was Monica Kravchenko. "Wait," the man said in a more peaceful tone. "Can I call the owner of this Monica who is in the paper here? I'll try to find out everything. I know her." "Please," the man in uniform said indifferently. "Just do your best. We won't be here long." Walter frantically dialed Monica's number, not understanding what had happened or why she owned his firm. This is some kind of misunderstanding, he thought. For a moment, the man thought he was being pranked, like on a famous TV show. Now the door will open and a film crew will come in. Everyone will shout it's a prank. A polite voice is heard in the receiver. "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable." "Shit," Walter cursed. "You can only take your personal belongings. Everything else must stay in the office." And seeing that his attempts to reach the new owner had failed, the bailiff pointed to the door. "Please." Still uncomprehending, the man headed for the door. On his way out, he mumbled, "I'll call the lawyers, I'll sort it all out. This is a misunderstanding." "It's your right." The uniformed man replied calmly, locking the door behind Walter. "Have a good day." Leaving the office, Walter dialed George's number. George was a childhood friend. "George." "We need to meet," the man said when his mate's voice came through the phone. "I'm in trouble." "No problem," Brother George replied. "Where and when?" "Let's meet at our bar on the seafront. Get there as soon as you can. All right?" "I will." When George walked through the door, Walter had almost emptied the bottle of whiskey. "Will you have a drink?" he asked his friend, and without waiting for an answer, poured the rest into the glass. "Goov, one more, and get something to eat." "You've got a lot on your plate." Bro George looked at his friend critically. "What's the occasion?" "You won't believe this. I got kicked out of my own office today. And they said my accounts are blocked, and I have to get out of my flat within 10 days. "So you see, they kicked you out of your own firm and won't let you back into your flat," George replied calmly. He sipped from his glass and took a bite of lemon slices. "Everything seemed fine with you, no problems." "I don't understand it either," Walter said in a stammering voice. "But the main thing, mate, you don't know the most important thing. They showed me a paper that says I'm no longer the owner of the company, but the new owner. Who do you think?" George looked with interest at his friend, who was already pouring from the bottle brought by the waiter. The man drank the whiskey, emptied the glass completely, trying to concentrate his gaze, looked into his mate's eyes. "The new owner of the firm is Monica Kravchenko." He said these words sarcastically, slowly, deliberately stretching each syllable so that George would understand faster. "You're Monica?" George seemed surprised. "How so? Did you sign the firm over to her? Are you stupid or what? It's enough that you provide for her with her boutique spas, foreign resorts. I wouldn't have thought of that. Then how did she come to own your firm and your flat?" George had a drink, too. "I know." Walter slammed his fist on the table, drawing the attention of the other bar patrons. The guard at the door tensed up, stretching, ready to throw the rowdy customer out the door. "Let's ask her." He took out his smartphone and dialed Monica's number, which was marked as favorite in his contacts. But the caller was still unavailable. "No answer, bitch." The man swore. "How about the spa?" George suggested. "That's where the girls usually switch their phones off." Damn it, Walter poured the glasses again. In the morning, he could hardly remember everything that happened afterwards, seeing that he'd had too much to drink. To avoid unnecessary trouble, the guard asked the friends to leave. Walter was indignant, trying to fight with the security guard. George persisted in dragging him into the air. He was assisted in this by the guard. George shoved Walter into the taxi and got in the front seat himself. Walter didn't remember anything else. Walter woke up in his bed with the realization that it was no longer his own. He slapped his bare feet on the floor. The man stalked into the kitchen, hoping there was something to drink in the fridge. "George, that's the kind of friend you are. You could have supplied me with something from my hangover," Walter thought, unable to find anything that would help his health. Sighing heavily, he headed for the shower to get some relief and get back to normal. The jets of water were refreshing. For a moment, Walter's memory told him that the bailiff's paperwork had not mentioned his car. "I'm going to go see Monica. Let her tell me how she so cleverly took over my firm," the man thought, drying himself with a fluffy towel. He hastily drank a cup of coffee, pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, and left the flat. There was no car in the yard. Walter remembered that he had left it outside the office. When he took a taxi to the office center, he was happy to see that his Jeep was parked in the car park. From the car, the man decided to call the office. Yes, Walter, the friendly voice of Mandy's secretary, answered the phone. Is anyone in my office? No, I'm in the waiting room. No one's come in, she answered. And when will you be here? Without answering the girl's question, he asked another. Has Monica been in? No, I said. No one's here. All right, work. Anyway, listen. Close everything up and go home. Get some rest. I'll call you later when there's news. The man turned the key in the ignition and drove out of the car park. He was determined. Now this bitch will explain everything. She'll tell me everything. I trusted her like I trusted myself. How did she manage to pull this on me? The Jeep flew down the avenue, overtaking cars, trolleybuses, buses. Walter imagined Monica telling him, "Honey, it was just a joke and everything would fall back into place." Entering the entrance of the house where his mistress lived, Walter pressed the button for the lift. But the lift was still not coming. He stood for a while and decided to climb the stairs to the 8th floor. The bell to the girl's flat rang with a cheerful trill. No one answered. Walter pressed the button again. Finally, the door opened. Monica stood on the threshold. What are you doing here?" she asked. But Walter pushed her away and walked inside. "You tell me what you're doing." "Yesterday I found out that you've taken over my company and my flat and embezzled my bank accounts." The man went into the living room. Monica followed him leisurely, wrapping up her dressing gown. "Why aren't you saying anything? Why are you flapping your eyes at me?" The girl looked at Walter confusedly, with fear in her eyes. Suddenly the door to the bedroom opened and George came out. Now confusion appeared in Walter's eyes. "It's you. What are you doing here?" he asked his friend. "I was asleep, as you see," he replied. "Why here?" Walter still didn't understand. George went to the bar, took out a bottle of wine and 3 glasses. He opened it slowly and, pouring the red liquid, handed 1 glass to Monica and sipped from the other. "Shall we drink?" He nodded at the glass. "I'm driving," Walter replied. The absurdity of the situation kept him from realizing what was happening. But he was beginning to realize the worst of it. His best friend was sleeping with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend had somehow robbed him of everything he had earned over the past years. "Will you explain something to me?" Walter plopped down on the couch, folded his arms across his chest, and prepared to listen to his lover and his friend's explanations. "I'm asking both of you," he raised his voice, glancing at George and the girl. "Don't you yell," George told him calmly. "Not at home. In fact, you don't even have a home anymore. Monica owns the flat as well as the firm. So it's not in your best interest to make a fuss here. If you behave well, we'll leave you some money for the first time," said George. "You will? You'll leave me some?" Walter jumped up from the couch, grabbed George by the neck, and started to shake him. But the man pushed him with such force that he was instantly back where he had been. Walter wrapped his arms around his head. Everything that was happening seemed like a terrible dream, a nightmare, a delusion. "So you're the one who pulled this off and left me with nothing." It finally dawned on Walter that this was no joke, no prank. "What do you think?" George asked wryly. "Monica wouldn't do such a thing. She's not very clever, as you know, but she has many other talents." "Yes, Monica." George put his arm round the girl's waist and held her close to him. He looked victorious next to Walter, who was devastated after last night's binge, humiliated. "How could you, George? We've been friends since we were kids," Walter asked in a quiet voice. "Friends?" George let go of Monica and walked over to Walter, who was sitting on the couch. He leaned over him, his gaze angry and prickly. "Is that what friends do? You always acted like a king, always taking the best for yourself. I had to make do with what was left. You had the best girls, the best clothes. Your parents even gave you a car freshman year. I was always your shadow. always rushing to your aid when you were whining, "George, help." Like yesterday, I came to you as soon as you called. Only that was the last time. Saying something like that? Walter tried to get a word in edgewise. "Shut up and listen." George cut him off. "I'll be running the firm from now on. Monica is just a formality. Without her, I couldn't have gotten the business away from you. I mean, you were head over heels in love with her. Fool. But you've always been emotionally driven and you've never thought straight. You're also too young and overconfident. No, Walter, you have no sense of self-preservation. And in this day and age, you can't trust anyone. You hear me? Not even the woman who spends the night with you. And you're the one who likes to talk about your successes," George continued. "So how much do you need for the first time? I'm not greedy. I can slip a few $1,000s from your old accounts." "Fuck you," Walter got up from the couch, looked angrily at his former, now no longer friend. Then he looked at Monica. "You're still a doormat, just like you were a doormat. You think he needs you? He'd trade you for another girl with longer legs." "All right, that's enough." George interrupted Walter. "Get out of here. Get out of here. And I don't want to see you again." George pushed Walter towards the exit. Back in the flat, he took out his suitcase and began to pack. A black anger was ripening in the man's soul, developing a filth-stinking, nasty, unbearable filth. Rolling the suitcase into the hallway, Walter returned to the bedroom and opened the safe. It was a good thing he'd been smart enough to keep at least some cash. He put a few wads of money into the suitcase, opened the door and left the flat. The man had nowhere to go. He had been driving around the city for several hours, wondering if he could stay at a holiday resort on the bay. It was a good idea in itself, but Walter didn't want to be alone. He needed to talk, alone in nature. Only a bottle would do. Without noticing, Walter drove out of town. He remembered his nightmare. Why hadn't he dreamt about his mother? She always stood up for Walter when his father scolded him. The decision came naturally. He would go to the remote village where he had taken his mother 5 years ago. It was time to apologize for everything, to repent for getting rid of an aging woman, to live a life of pleasure, to fall to his knees and beg, plead, forgive him. Just so long as Mum was alive. Walter's mother, Tiffany, was originally from Vermont. Her parents lived in a lakeside village near a nature preserve. They worked on a ranch. Unlike other families that had 5 or 6 children, Tiffany's parents did not have many children. After giving birth to a daughter, Tiffany's mother underwent a complicated surgery and was unable to have any more children. The father, who had always wanted multiple sons, accepted it. But Tiffany grew up surprisingly docile. She helped her father and mother with everything. She carried water, stacked firewood, weeded the vegetable garden. Gradually, her father even began to take her hunting and fishing. Her mother tried to teach her the wisdom of cooking. On long winter evenings, they spun, knitted and sewed warm clothes together: socks, mittens, hats, waistcoats. When Tiffany finished 9 grades, she was ready to leave for New York. The village slowly began to die out. The young people were moving away. Houses were falling into disrepair, left without owners. Having settled in the cities, the children took the elderly parents to their homes. When Tiffany's mother heard of her daughter's plans, she pleaded, "Daughter, how can we be without you? Who will bring us a glass of water in our old age? I'll go to college or university, finish, get a job and help you," Tiffany replied. "And my mother is right," said my father. "There's really nothing for girls to do here. I heard the other day they're closing the post office. We'll be traveling 40 miles for our pensions. Let her go. God willing, she'll do well and everything will be all right." Having reconciled, the mother helped her to pack her daughter's things, and on the appointed day, she and her father took her in a pickup truck to the railway station. A month later, they received a telegram. "Mom, Dad." I got into college. Tears came to the mother's eyes. Her father comforted her. "Tiffany's not stupid. She'll learn. She'll become a man." Maybe she'll take us with her." "Where can we go, Father?" To New York, sobbed her mother. "Where would we go from our farm?" Tiffany was used to city life. After graduating from college, Tiffany got a job at a factory in the personnel department. That's where she met her husband. He was a foreman on the shop floor. For more than a year, the man courted the girl. He was 10 years older. So Tiffany was very shy of this grown man. But he was persistent, and after a year and a half, Tiffany and Stephen got married, planning a modest wedding. And after 3 more years, the works department gave the young family a flat. That's when they began to think about having children. But the years flew by, and Tiffany didn't get pregnant. Doctors said that she was completely healthy and did not understand the reason for the couple's childlessness. 10 years had passed since Tiffany had left her home village, moved away from her parents, and she was constantly writing letters to them. Dad and Mom answered them, but she couldn't go and visit her family. New York, with its frantic pace of life, wouldn't let her go. And yet Tiffany returned to the village. Only the occasion was not a happy one. One day she received a telegram from her father that her mother had died. Taking time off work, she and her husband bought train tickets and traveled to the funeral the same day. As they walked through the village streets to their home, Tiffany was struck by how different everything was. The windows of the ramshackle houses were boarded up. There were no flowering plants in the front gardens, and the cows and chickens could not be heard mooing in the yards. The village was dying. A few neighbors, mostly old men and women, stood at the gate of her father's house, black shawls tied around their heads. Tiffany walked into the house. On a stool stood the coffin in which her mother lay. The young woman cried as she crouched down beside it. She stroked her mother's head, her hands, gazing into her dead, peaceful expression. It was as if Mum was sound asleep. Only from that sleep there would never again be an awakening. After the wake, when the neighbors had dispersed, Tiffany and Stephen remained seated at the table with their father. "That's it, daughter. Our Mum's gone," the man said softly. "She was ill. That's understandable. It's just a pity she didn't get to see her grandchildren." "Daddy, we can't have boys," Tiffany complained. She noticed her husband's reproachful look and lowered her eyes. "Do the doctors say they're just throwing up their hands?" Dad asked. "They say we're both healthy," she shrugged her shoulders. "Apparently our time has not yet come to become parents." "It's not the time," sighed the father. "Sins do not give." "What are our sins, Daddy?" Tiffany got excited. "Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Sin is a multi-generational thing. You don't hear its reverberations right away. But you should repent for the sins of your ancestors." "Well, it's time to go to bed. I'll go close up the cattle, and you make yourselves comfortable. We'll talk in the morning." And in the morning the father woke up the sleeping couple and took his daughter and son-in-law to the forest. They walked for a long time along a narrow path until they came to a waterfall, a turbulent stream of water jets falling down from a high rock, creating an iridescent fountain of splashes in the sunlight. The spray played with different colors, flying in a fine trot in all directions. In the bowl at the foot of the waterfall, the water calmed down, allowing me to see the reflection of my face, slightly distorted by the movement of the water. "Take off your clothes," Father ordered. "Dip yourself in the water 3 times and cross yourself." "Am I not baptized?" Stephen tried to object, to whom the whole ritual seemed like nonsense. "Just say, 'Forgive me, Lord,'" the man said firmly, stroking his gray beard. "He might hear you. We're not Christians." Tiffany and Stephen went down to the waterfall bowl and did as their father had instructed. They walked home in silence, each thinking about something different. At dinner, Father said, "The old people used to say, if someone dies in a family and a child appears in the same year, it means that God has forgiven the sins of the deceased. God is merciful. He will forgive our mom and give you children." Stephen looked at his father-in-law in surprise. Tiffany only spoke, "God willing, Daddy, God willing." A month later, the woman found out she was pregnant. And in May, she and her husband had a beautiful baby boy, Walter. The couple was happy they couldn't get enough of the baby. The joy of the birth of a son overshadowed the death of Tiffany's father. The news that came from the neighbors, already after the funeral of the man. For 10 years of childless life, they managed to save money. Therefore, immediately after the birth of their son, Tiffany and Stephen bought a cooperative 2-room flat in a new building, in which a separate room was allocated for Walter. Stephen quickly sobered up from the euphoria of becoming a father. He tried to teach his son to work hard, be responsible, and stand up for himself. But Tiffany continued to nurse him like a hen. "You're too hard on your son," Stephen, she told her husband, who made her 3-year-old son take out the bin. "He is still very young. It's nothing, he can lift a cup, but will he carry the bucket away?" On weekends, his father dragged his son to the park for a jog, made him do push-ups and pull-ups on the bar. And when he was 5 years old, he gave him to a boxing class. However, after the first bruise received by his son at the training, his mother flatly refused to take the child to boxing. "Do you want to make your only son an invalid?" She objected to her husband's arguments that the boy should grow up to be a man. Stephen was madly in love with his wife. It was difficult for him to argue with her. The man tried to avoid the slightest cause for quarrel, so in most cases Tiffany was able to win the right to bring up her son as she wanted. Walter was never denied anything. The best toys, a bicycle, beautiful things bought in brand-name shops, all this was taken for granted. Walter was not a stupid boy, though. At school, he studied for a solid 4. Teachers praised the bright pupil, but his discipline was lousy. With his friend George, who lived in the next door, they were always inventing new pranks. One day they bought a rat from a pet shop and put it in the teacher's desk drawer. When she opened it to take out her notebook, she nearly fainted. The mother was summoned to the principal's office. Blushing, she apologized for her son and promised that she would have a very serious talk with him at home. The next day, Walter and George broke a window in the teacher's lounge by throwing a basketball at it. Tiffany had to tell her husband. The principal strictly ordered that new glass be put into the window frame immediately, but the woman herself could not do it. As punishment, Walter was banned from the yard for a week. During spring break, he sat at home, looking out the window as the boys played in the yard. Still, Tiffany's son's childhood was no worse than other children's. In the 9th grade, Walter was given a moped for his birthday. At the end of the first year of the institute, his father bought him a new car. Parents loved their son with all their hearts, and no matter how hard they tried to bring him up in strictness, paid for his growing needs. After graduating from the economics department of the institute, the boy got a job in a large trading firm. "I'm not going to work for my uncle all my life," he told his parents. "Here I will gain experience, learn how everything is actually arranged there. I'll open my own firm." Father by that time had already retired, but continued to work, having traveled a long professional path from a simple worker to the master of the shop, and then the head of production. He thought that trade was not a serious business. The man repeatedly persuaded his son to go to work at the plant in the planning and economic department, but he only waved him away. "Here is your factory, the last century," said Walter. "The future is in business." Dad just shook his head. He thought that business was all about bandits, while an honest man should work for the good of his country. He himself lived like that until the last day, every morning passing through the factory gate. Walter's father passed away without giving anyone long suffering and agony. One day he fell asleep and never woke up. He died quietly, in his sleep. Walter turned 30 years old that year. After his father's funeral, Walter felt he was in charge of the family and felt it was his time to make decisions. He left the firm, sitting in his room in front of his computer 24 hours a day. Then one day he said to his mother, I know you and your father had savings. I've decided to start my own firm and I want to ask you for money." "How much do you need?" Tiffany asked. "The more the better. I need to rent an office, buy office equipment, but I also need money for the first batch of goods," Walter replied. "I'll give it to you." "Sure, son," agreed his mother, who was not used to refusing Walter. A year later, Walter was already the director of a trading company, which did not bring super profits but worked quite successfully. The staff was a few dozen employees, which son Tiffany paid salaries on time, and especially enterprising even encouraged bonuses and trips to seaside resorts. And he was in no hurry to return the money his mother had given him to start the business. Tiffany didn't ask him to. She was happy that her son was doing what he loved and that he was good at it. As time went on, and one day Walter came home and told his mother, "I'm bringing a girl over tonight, so make us something for dinner." Tiffany smiled. She had been waiting for her son to marry for a long time, but there was no one in their house except his friend George, with whom they had been inseparable since childhood, and suddenly Walter would bring a girl. Maybe they'll even announce that they're getting married. Tiffany would be sure to bless the young couple so that all would be well in their lives. She really wanted to babysit her grandchildren. Her son is in his 30s, and he's not even thinking about kids. Walter met Monica at a club. A spectacular girl in a short, tight dress immediately attracted the attention of the guy. Bright, with a defiant look. She was the kind of girl they say pretty devil. She sat behind the bar and slowly sipped her cocktail. "Do you miss me?" Walter asked and sat down next to her. The girl looked at him with an appraising gaze. Apparently she liked the young man, decently dressed, attractive, and when he pulled his wallet out of his pocket, took out a large note and handed it to the bartender, saying, "I'll have a whiskey and the girl will have whatever she's drinking." The pretty girl smiled white-hot. Walter, the man, introduced himself. "Monica," the girl said, stretching her name slightly. "I mean here alone." "What are you interested in?" The girl was obviously flirting with her new acquaintance. "Very serious," Walter said, and put his palm on Monica's waist. "Be careful," she warned him. "I might hurt you." How could such a sweet, charming girl offend a poor, lonely guy? I wouldn't believe it. Walter tried to make a joke. "Here's to introductions," he drank, pushed the glass away from him, and said to the bartender mate, "Do it again." Monica, sipping her cocktail leisurely, looked at the man. "Are you alone?" the girl asked. "Not exactly. My friend and I agreed to meet here, to have a little fun, and all that work and work," answered Walter, calculating the next portion of whiskey. "So I'm the third extra?" Monica made a jokingly sad expression on her face. "Where does poor Walter work that he's so tired?" "Poor Walter works at his own firm." "Wait, what's poor Walter?" "He's not poor. He's a very rich man." He started to flounder a bit. "There's my friend George." George came to the counter. Walter introduced George to his new girlfriend, and the group moved into the lounge and took a table. Walter found himself liking Monica more and more, and this liking grew in proportion to the drink. The club was already closing when the group poured out into the street. Monica put her arms around Walter's neck and whispered, "Would you like to continue the evening?" "I'd love to," Walter mumbled. "Then let's go back to my place." "Do you have a drink?" she asked, pulling him close to her by his slim waist. "Do you have any?" Walter spent the night at Monica's, and in the morning, barely able to get his head off the pillow, decided to call George. He had to get home somehow, and George hadn't had much to drink last night. Might as well pick him up brotherly. The phone rang with long beeps. No one answered. "You're up, sweetheart." "Good morning." Monica stretched sweetly in bed. She reached over to the bedside table, where a bottle of champagne stood. She poured it into a glass, drank it, and handed it to Walter. Want some? It'll give you a headache. Monica waved her head, tossing her hair over the pillow. Don't you have anything stronger? Walter asked. Come on, anyway. There's no ride home, he agreed. What about a taxi? Or do you just not want to go? Monica wagged her finger at him. Walter fell into the hottie's arms. Finally, tearing themselves away from each other, they lay silent, breathing heavily. Walter was the first to break the silence. I'm kind of hungry. Should I cook something to eat? No cooking. I hate the cooker and everything that goes with it, she said flatly. Why don't we go out and have lunch? Where? A restaurant, for example. Let's do that. Walter decided that this wonderful night must have a beautiful ending. I'll just make one phone call, he said. Okay. I'm going to take a shower. Wrapped in a sheet, Monica stalked down the corridor. Tiffany was in a hurry to get home from work. She had to run to the shop to buy cheese and sausage. Today her son would bring his girlfriend to meet her. That thought made her happy. Surely this girl from his work. She's probably smart, kind, and very pretty. There's no other way around it. Her boy won't go out with just anyone. After changing her clothes, the housewife put on an apron and began to prepare dinner. She sent the chicken, carefully marinated since the morning, into the oven and began to prepare the appetizers. In the living room, she spread a beautiful tablecloth on the table and arranged the dishes and utensils. Tiffany was almost ready when the doorbell rang. She hurried into the hallway. Mom, we're here. Walter greeted her mother cheerfully, kissing her on the cheek. This is Monica. Pleased to meet you, the woman replied, looking at the girl with a smile. She looked nothing like the image Tiffany had painted in her mind of her future daughter-in-law, bright, tall, and wearing a short skirt. I'm Tiffany, she introduced herself. The girl smiled silently back. She looked around the spacious hallway with interest. Why are we standing here? Come into the hall, Tiffany invited her son and his girlfriend. I'll be right there, the woman went into the kitchen, while Monica continued to turn her head from side to side. Nice place you have here. Do you live here alone? Yes, my father died and it's just me and my mum, Walter said, uncorking a bottle of champagne. Why don't you get married? The girl asked. It had never occurred to me. Maybe I haven't met the one I want to spend my life with, replied the man. Are you sure? Or maybe your mum doesn't let you. Monica laughed, and Walter looked at her, not knowing whether she was joking or seriously considering him a mama's boy. Stop it. I have a great mum, he hugged the girl. Tiffany came into the room. When she saw the young people, she was a little confused. Well, everything is ready. We can sit down at the table. The woman had a dish with fried chicken in her hands. It smells so good, Mummy. Walter wiggled his nose. I love it when you bake chicken with your signature recipe. Thank you, son, Tiffany replied. Wanting to lighten the mood a little, she turned to Monica. What do you, Monica, like to cook? Can you share a recipe? Monica looked at the woman, then at Walter. I don't like to cook anything, she replied. I prefer to eat in restaurants or, at the very least, order takeout. It was Tiffany's turn to be surprised. How can you do that? How are you going to feed your husband and children? After all, we all know the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. That wisdom works, believe me. So you married Walter's dad because of your chicken frying skills? Monica asked, not the least bit embarrassed, reaching for the salad. Tiffany stopped chewing for a moment. She thought the question was downright rude and insensitive. The smile slowly slid off the woman's face. She looked at Monica, who was putting on the salad, not noticing that she had said something wrong. Sensing the awkwardness of the situation, Walter tried to gloss over it. "Mummy," Monica wanted to say that you are a very good cook, and Daddy just couldn't help but fall in love with such a good hostess. He looked at Monica. She nodded her head. "Yes, that's what I was going to say," she said, still chewing. The dinner conversation did not go well. After tea and cake, Walter and Monica left. "I'll see Monica off and come back," he kissed his mother on the cheek. She continued to clear the dishes from the table. She did not say goodbye to her guest, showing her displeasure with her son's choice. When the son returned home, Tiffany was about to go to bed. She took a sedative. The woman couldn't get over Walter's girlfriend. She seemed rude, defiant. She was nothing like Tiffany had imagined her future daughter-in-law to be. "Mama, are you still awake?" Walter asked, peering into his mother's bedroom. "No, son," she sighed. "Your friend made my blood pressure skyrocket, and I had to take medicine." "Mom, why do you have to make things so complicated?" The man was indignant. Monica is a normal, modern girl. If she doesn't want to stand at the cooker, she doesn't have to. Nowadays, you can really order ready meals, and the laundry can be delivered to the laundrette. Specially trained people can clean the house too. Why bother? Is it not normal that a woman wants to be beautiful and well-groomed, not tortured by constant cooking, laundry, and cleaning? "Do you think I'm tortured?" Tiffany asked. "Yes, all the years I took care of your father. He always had clean, ironed shirts, and he was always well-fed, and the delicious dumplings we used to make together. Don't you remember? And this one of yours probably has no idea how normal people make dumplings, pies, or where clean linen comes from in the cupboard." "Mom, this is my choice in my life." Walter tried to argue with his mother. "She doesn't want anything from you but money. Look at her. She's dressed like Tiffany almost swore, though she wasn't in the habit of doing that. I'm sorry, God. If your father had seen that tarnished, tastelessly dressed and ill-mannered girl. Here we go. I'm going to bed. I have to get up early tomorrow," said Walter. He walked out of his mother's bedroom, closing the door behind him. Tiffany sat at the dressing table for a while longer, looking at her face in the mirror. Since her husband's death, she had visibly deteriorated. Her face showed signs of fatigue. Maybe I should retire, she thought. It wasn't the first time Tiffany had thought it was time to stop working. Her health was failing more and more. Her eyesight was getting worse. Then there were the computers that now had to be mastered. Tiffany was having a hard time. The younger generation, on the other hand, was getting up to speed and not afraid to work with any software. "It's decided I'll talk to the boss tomorrow. If there is a candidate to take my place, I'll make way for the young people and go on a well-deserved holiday," she decided. Walter's mood was high. His trading company was 1 year old. As director and owner, he could see the results. Profits were growing. There were more and more partners, and the accounts were finally beginning to show a substantial amount of money. On this occasion, the man decided to thank his employees and organize a party. The staff took the news with enthusiasm. It was decided to free the meeting room, decorate it, and order catering with snacks, drinks, and dishes from the restaurant. On the appointed day, everyone gathered to celebrate the firm's anniversary. George and Monica were also invited. "Dear friends, colleagues," Walter addressed the audience. "I am happy that we are celebrating the first birthday of our company. I would like to thank you for believing in the success of our business from day one and doing everything to make it grow, bring us success and profit. Thank you." The people applauded loudly. "I had no idea that your employees loved and respected you so much," Monica said, hugging Walter around the neck. All evening she had been showing that she was directly related to the director, that she was not just his girlfriend but his favorite girl. Monica had far-reaching plans for Walter. Except his mother Tiffany might be a problem. The other day, Walter gave Monica a luxurious fur coat. However, the gift was not bought on the man's initiative. They were driving through town, and Monica saw a fur store. She asked to come in because she really likes beautiful fur coats and mantos. The man was unable to object. The girl drove him crazy, and he could not give up his love adventures with Monica. Laving between the racks of coats and mantos, the girl tried on one or the other. At last she came out to Walter, who was drinking coffee on a sofa, spinning round and round. The blue mink coat was very much to the face of the tall and slender Monica. But the price tag that dangled from the sleeve confused Walter. Honey, Monica pouted with greasy scarlet lipstick. Don't I deserve such a gift from you? Look at something else, darling. And preferably this number should be one less zero, the man suggested. No, I want this one. It suits me very well. Don't you think it's a little overpriced? It's overpriced. In Europe you can buy much cheaper. Walter tried to dissuade the girl from buying it. But Monica stood her ground. The man had to agree. Wrap it up, he said to the saleswoman, slightly damaging his mood. Prevented Walter from rejoicing in the renewal together with Monica. But very soon the girl was able to lift his spirits by dragging him to her house. He returned home at midnight. The morning coffee, prepared by Tiffany, was invigorating and set him up for work. Walter stepped out of the shower and joined his mother. The woman carefully tossed her son a plate of sandwiches. Did you get home late last night? Did you have to work late? She asked Walter. No, he answered briefly. Where were you then? Walter put the cup on the table, hesitated for a moment, then answered in an irritated tone. Mum, what am I, 5 years old? Are you going to control me all my life? Where I want to be, I'll be there. When I want, then I come. What do you care? Calm down, Tiffany said. I was just wondering, Tiffany said. She was startled. Her son had never let her raise her voice before. It's just that you usually tell me how you spend your time with George, she added. Walter got up from the table, leaving the cup with the unfinished coffee. I'm out of here. Lots of work, sorry, he said, and turned around, leaving the kitchen. He didn't even kiss his mother goodbye. The conversation hadn't gone well, and the morning wasn't going well. In fact, Tiffany wanted to tell her son about her decision to take a well-deserved retirement. The day before, she'd talked to the head of human resources at the plant. And it turned out she'd been wanting her niece to take Tiffany's place for a long time. But only she was shy to say, because Tiffany had worked at the same place all her life and was honored by the bosses. The issue had resolved itself in a fortnight. The woman would be retiring, giving way to a new generation. Now she wondered how her son would react. Surely he would be pleased. Tiffany was already making plans. First, she wanted to buy a trip to a sanatorium. She'd wanted to go to Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic for a long time. True, she would have to ask Walter to pay back some of the money she had lent him a year ago to start a business. But her son was apparently doing well, and he would give her the money. And then, when she got back from her trip, she'd renovate the flat. It will be necessary to hire a good team of workers to do everything qualitatively and quickly. And in the renovated flat, she would be able to live out her life. That was Tiffany's plan as she planned to leave work. But that evening, Walter didn't come home again. After work, he went to Monica's house, taking her favorite champagne on the way. After a pleasant time, they lay cuddled together. Walter, the girl murmured. How about it? What he said. Will you marry me? What do you mean yours? Yes or no? She whispered caressingly in his ear. I will, Walter answered. When? Monica persisted. Tomorrow, isn't it? Walter finally came to his senses and looked at the girl. "Are we that bad or what?" he asked. Monica reached over to the nightstand for a packet of cigarettes. "I knew it," she said resentfully. "I knew you were just like all men. You come to me, and then you marry some gray mouse." "What made you think that?" the man asked, opening the window to light a cigarette. "If you wanted to marry me, you would have proposed already. What am I, a girl for an hour or something?" "Don't talk nonsense," Walter said. "Don't I give you money? I don't buy you presents. I don't fulfill your wishes." "That's all right. But a wife is something else. If a man marries, he proves his love. You love me, don't you?" "I do." "All right, if that's the way you want it, we'll get married." He put out his cigarette. "Then come to me, my little cat." Walter couldn't resist Monica. A few days later, he picked Monica up after work and they went to his house to tell Tiffany that they were getting married. To mark the occasion, the girl wore a new fur coat Walter had bought her. Let his mother see that he spared nothing for her. Tiffany wasn't expecting any guests. She wasn't feeling well today. Her blood pressure spiked and she had to take some medicine. She lay on the sofa in the living room and turned on the television softly. When she heard the sound of the door opening in the hallway, she didn't get up. She knew it was her son. "Mom, you're home. We're home," shouted Walter from the hallway, helping Monica out of her outerwear. Realizing that her son had not returned alone, Tiffany got up from the couch. Walter and Monica entered the room. "Hi, were you resting or something?" the man asked. "Yeah, I wasn't feeling well," the mother replied. "Hello, Tiffany." Monica tried to appear polite, but still caused negative emotions in Tiffany, which she could hardly hide. "Hello, Monica. Come on in." "I'll put the kettle on." The woman went into the kitchen, but Monica beat her to it. "Don't worry, sit down, rest, I'll do it myself," Monica said. "Yes, Walter, go ahead." He lightly slapped her just below her back. But Tiffany noticed his gesture and wrinkled her nose, disliking the girl even more. When everyone was seated at the table, Monica elbowed Walter in the side. She couldn't wait for him to tell her mother that they were getting married soon. "Mom, Monica and I have something we want to tell you." Walter began, trying to keep his tone solemn, but he hesitated a little. "Why are you slowing down, Walter?" said the girl loudly and clearly, not waiting for the groom to make up his mind to announce the news. "Tiffany, we're getting married." Tiffany sighed and stared into her teacup. "Oh, and yet the contagion is unapologetic," she thought. "Yes, Mum, tomorrow we'll go and apply at the registry office. There are some people we know there, so we won't have to wait long. I think we can get married in a month." "What's the rush? Is she pregnant?" The woman nodded towards Monica, not even wanting to say her name. "Are you crazy?" The girl was indignant. "I'm pregnant." "Well, no, that's not me. It's just that usually those who are in such a hurry are those who have noticed a baby in their sin. Normal people prepare for a wedding deliberately, thinking about every step," Tiffany said calmly and judiciously. "Walter, have you heard? According to your mother, we're not normal people." "I'm shocked." "Walter, why aren't you saying anything?" Monica echoed loudly. "Keep it down, please," Walter's mother asked. "I have a terrible headache." "Mom, it's what we decided," said the man calmly. "It's out of the question. We came with Monica to tell you the news first." "Thank you for that," sighed the mother. She sipped her tea, took a candy from the vase and slowly unwrapped the wrapper. "Aren't you glad? Don't you have anything more to say?" "I'm glad when you're happy. That's all I can tell you," Tiffany replied. "But since you come to me with news, I have something to tell you." The couple stared at the woman in surprise. Taking another bite of her chocolate candy, Tiffany finished her tea. As of Monday, I'm taking a well-deserved holiday. I've decided that I've had enough of working, and it's time to take a break, she said. Congratulations, Mum. It's about time, Walter exclaimed. Wait, don't interrupt me and listen, the mother continued, looking into her son's eyes. First of all, I want you to know that I want to have a healthy holiday. That's why I plan to buy a trip to Karlovy Vary. There is good air, mineral springs, all conditions for treatment of my arthritis and hypertension. That's great. I support this idea and I'm happy for you, Walter replied. While I'm in the Czech Republic, I'll need to renovate my flat, Tiffany continued. So I've decided to hire a team of decorators and have them do it right, so I don't have to think about how to fix it up later. I think it'll be enough to last me a lifetime. Walter looked round the kitchen. The flat really should have been renovated a long time ago. Especially nowadays, everything was done with beautiful, modern materials. And if they brought in a designer, they could make a luxury flat out of their 3-bedroom. In that connection, Walter, I'd like to ask you to return the money I gave you for your business. I'm going to need it now, Tiffany said. Walter looked up and stared at his mother. Monica looked at her lover in surprise. It was obvious that he was confused. His mother's desire to get the money back came as a surprise to the man. To be honest, he had already forgotten, thanks to whom he was able to start so successfully and turn the firm, as they call it, from scratch. I hope to get it next week, because I have to pay for the trip and give a deposit to the construction team, the mother added. The woman calmly finished her tea, pretending not to notice how puzzled her son was. Monica did not understand anything at all. Only one thing was clear to her: the wedding seemed to be on the verge of failure. It was not enough for the girl to sign and become Walter's wife. She dreamed of a lavish wedding with a museum restaurant and a huge number of guests. Monica was the first to break the silence in the kitchen. You know what, Tiffany? You should be ashamed to ask Walter for money. He's your own son, not a creditor. And besides, we have a big event coming up. Do you want us to celebrate our wedding in the dining room? Shut up, Walter said quietly. But Monica was unstoppable. You're old. You don't need much. Buy yourself a trip to a boarding house in Los Angeles County and relax for a month. You can renovate it in 2 or 3 years. What, do you have to have celebrities here so you can do a fancy renovation? Shut up, Monica. Walter tried to calm the girl down. No, Walter, I will not shut up. I'm your wife for 5 minutes, and therefore I have the right to decide where to spend your money. If I say there's going to be a wedding, there's going to be a wedding, or you'll never see me again. The girl literally jumped from the table, quickly dressed and slammed the door. Walter tried to rush after her, but Tiffany stopped him abruptly. Sit down, I haven't finished, she said. Confused, the man slumped back in his chair. That's a lot of money, he said. You have to be warned about such things in advance. This money is still in circulation. Soon we'll have to pay for another shipment of goods. It's not even 1 lorry, but several. Do you realize how much money that is? I have no idea, and I don't want to think about it, Tiffany said firmly. When you needed the money, I gave it to you with no terms or conditions. I was counting on your integrity. Now I need it, and I want it back without disrupting my plans. Mum, don't you care about my plans? Walter asked indignantly. I come to you, tell you I'm getting married, that Monica and I are going to celebrate the wedding in a restaurant. And you don't react to that? How am I supposed to react, son? It's your life, your decision. What does that have to do with me? Walter asked. What does it have to do with you? You should at least be happy and at most help me, Tiffany replied. No, my dear. Everything I had to do, I did for you. You're an adult. You're well into your 30s. so the word shit doesn't apply to me now. It's up to you to look after, protect, and support your mother in her old age. Or do you have a different opinion? You're being unfair by denying me the opportunity to marry, Walter said sadly. I'm not stopping you. Marry whoever you want to marry. Give me the money. And let's end this pointless conversation. Tiffany left the kitchen and went to her bedroom. Walter sat there thinking. He was working out in his mind how to get out of this situation without arguing with his mother and Monica, and without losing profits at the firm. He did have to pay for another shipment of goods, and it was quite a large sum. He dialed Monica's number, deciding to go to her to discuss everything, and at the same time to stay at her place for the night. But she didn't answer the phone. She's offended, Walter thought. He switched off the kitchen light and left the flat. Getting into his car, the man headed for his mistress's house. The light in her window was on. Walter noticed this as he drove up to Monica's house. But when he rang the doorbell, no one answered. The man started pounding on the door with his fist. Monica, open up, we need to talk. Footsteps were heard outside the door. Walter breathed out a sigh of relief. What do you want? Monica asked through the door. Talk. We already did. I thought you were a man. Turns out you can't make up your mind without your mummy. Yes, I can, honey. Open up, Walter asked. The door opened softly. A man stepped into the hallway. Monica stood with her back against the wall, her lips down and her eyes on the floor. Her whole appearance showed how much she resented Walter and his mother. Well, aren't you sorry, honey? The man tried to hug her, but Monica pushed him away. Tell me, who do you want to live with, Mummy or me? Monica asked. Of course with you, my love, answered Walter. Then why don't you consider me at all? Do I have to get married in a dressing gown? And my guests will eat Olivier and potatoes with cutlets in the dining room. Don't worry, it won't happen. You just have to wait a little longer, Walter urged her. I don't want to wait. Can't your mother wait with her silly whims? Monica was indignant. I don't know, dear, but we'll think of something together. So he pulled the girl against him and quietly pushed her towards the bedroom. Monica gave in. She knew what strings Walter could pull. Then, lying in bed, they thought of a plan of action. Should we send your mother to a relative? Monica asked. Why? Walter didn't understand. To keep her out of the way. Don't you understand? Let her stay here. We'll have a wedding in the meantime. And when she gets here, you'll give her the money, or part of the debt. She doesn't even have any relatives, Walter puffed on his cigarette. She had relatives. Only her father and mother lived in a remote village, but they died a long time ago. I was just a kid. Where is this village? The mistress asked. Somewhere in Montana. And I didn't seem to go into much detail. Didn't her parents leave her daughter anything when she died? If there's no one else, she must have inherited something. Oh, please don't be ridiculous. What inheritance is there in a remote village? It's a small house, but it's probably rotten by now. My mother once went to my parents' grave and told me that almost all the houses in the village were abandoned. Everything was dead. Monica raised herself up on her elbows and looked carefully into Walter's eyes. There was triumph in her gaze. That's the way out, my dear, she whispered, smiling. Walter arrived home on time on the appointed day. Tiffany noticed that Walter was acting strangely, always trying to give her something. Then he called her to have tea together and talk. After the fight the other day, they'd hardly spoken. But apparently the son had come to his senses and realized that his mother was right. Walter poured the aromatic tea he'd brewed himself into cups and moved the sugar to Tiffany. How are things going at the firm, son? The woman asked. It's fine, as usual. We're working, Making progress. You know we're not going backwards, Walter said, smiling. The mother thought his smile was strained, unnatural. What do you do? Did you go to a travel agency? Tiffany began to tell her, but her son interrupted her, asking for a clean hand towel. The woman went to her room, and he quickly pulled a vial from his pocket and dribbled it into his mother's cup. It was a sleeping pill. Here you go. The mother handed Walter a towel. Thank you, Mum. Now you can drink your tea in peace. You drink too. As they talked, the woman drank the whole cup and suddenly felt faint. She leaned against the wall. I don't feel well, Walter, she said. But the man had already taken her in his arms and carried her into the room. He laid her on the sofa and hurried into the hallway to open the front door. She's asleep. Everything worked out, Monica asked as she entered the flat. Yes, I think she's asleep. We're in a hurry. We have to get there before she wakes up. Walter took his mother in his arms and Monica grabbed a blanket and pillow from the couch. They left the flat and walked down to the courtyard. The man put his mother in the back seat, placing a pillow under her head, and covered her with the blanket. Opening the boot, he threw in Tiffany's warm clothes that Monica had collected. Several bags of groceries stood nearby. Slamming the doors, Walter and Monica hit the road. As they pulled onto the motorway, Walter increased his speed. He drove as fast as he could, afraid that his mother would wake up and his and Monica's plan would fail. By 5 a.m., they reached the remote village where Tiffany had been born and raised. They found her parents' house. There was hardly any snow in town, but here it was knee-deep. Walter made his way to the gate and struggled to open it, and then the door to the house. He went back to the car, carried his mother into the hut, and put her on the bed. Where should I put the groceries? Monica asked. She was standing in the doorway holding the bags. Over there on the table, Walter pointed. He covered the mother with a blanket and put a coat on top to keep her warm. Let's go, Monica. They closed the door and drove away. They glimpsed abandoned houses with boarded-up shutters, lit by headlights. Tiffany woke up and felt terribly cold. She struggled to open her eyes. Her head hurt badly. She tried to get up, but fell back onto the bed, feeling completely powerless. Where am I? Thought the woman. There were wooden walls all around. Faint daylight shone through the boarded-up windows. It took a while for Tiffany to realize that she was in her parents' house. But how she had come to be here, the woman didn't understand. The last thing she remembered was Walter giving her tea. And then darkness. Masters, is anyone there? There was a man's voice. There was a banging on the door. Tiffany tried to answer, but her tongue stuck to her mouth. Hey, came another shout from outside. I'm here, she said in a hoarse whisper. Her throat ached terribly. The door opened. A man with a gray beard, wearing a warm jacket and a winter hat, appeared on the threshold. When he saw the woman lying on the bed under some things, he rushed to her. Who are you? What's the matter with you? He asked Tiffany, patting her cheeks. Are you all right? It's cold, she whispered. Now wait, let me help you. The man grabbed a blanket, wrapped it around Tiffany, threw off his jacket and covered her with it, tucking it under her side. How did you end up here? No one's been here in ages. She stared at him, unable to say a word. A man ran out of the house in a jumper. He was back in a minute. I'll get some wood. I'll heat the stove. It'll be warm. You just put your head down for now. Wait a bit. In a few minutes, the wood was crackling in the stove. Tiffany could see the glow of scarlet flame through the crack in the door. The cooker was warped and wouldn't close tightly. I see you've made a good home here. How much groceries did you bring? Tiffany turned her head and saw the man looking at the bags on the table. She warmed up a little and began to come round. The woman realized that Walter had brought her here to keep her. She was against his wedding, and she demanded the money back. Meanwhile, the man had put a cloth rucksack on the table. "I'll pour you some hot tea. You'll warm up quickly," he said, and took a thermos out of the rucksack. He unscrewed the lid of the glass and poured the hot, aromatic drink into it. Taking a seat next to Tiffany on the bed, he helped her up. "Here you go. It's delicious." "Thank you." The woman took a few sips and thanked him. "What's this?" "I make it myself. It's rosehip, hawthorn, and some other herbs." The man replied. "Do you feel better?" "Yes, I'm almost completely warmed up. And I'm walking, looking at the tracks of a car. From it, footprints lead to the house," began to tell the stranger. "No one has been in this house for ages, and now hello guests have arrived. So I thought I'd go in and check who had arrived. And here you are." "Who are you?" Tiffany asked. As she drank the hot tea, she felt invigorated. Her headache was gone. "Oh, forgive me, you old fool. I forgot to introduce myself," the man apologized. "I'm Oscar, the local forester." "Oscar? How strange," Tiffany said thoughtfully. "Why strange?" The man didn't understand. Tiffany sat up on the bed. She felt the warmth of the house. The crackling logs in the cooker warmed not only her body but also her soul. She looked round the room. The colored wallpaper had almost completely fallen off the walls. The ceiling looked back at her. Old curtains were hanging from the windows. "My mum made them when I was a girl. This is my home. You see, I grew up here, lived with my parents, then went to the city to study and stayed there. My daddy's name was Oscar. He was a forester in those days. Everyone in the neighborhood respected him. He was a very good man." Oscar listened in surprise at first, and then he laughed. "So I'm a forester too." "Oscar, like your father. What a coincidence. I never would have guessed. And of course I've heard that a very good man used to be a forester here. But I didn't know we were namesakes." Oscar laughed again. "How did you end up here? Where are your relatives and friends? The car you came in? I saw the tracks. A Jeep or some other off-road vehicle?" "I don't know," Tiffany said sadly. "I guess I don't have any family or loved ones anymore." The forester took her hand in his, noticing the sadness of her new acquaintance. "Don't jump to conclusions. Things happen in life," he sighed tiredly. Then he squared his shoulders and spoke in a cheerful voice. "If you've decided to stay here, you'll have to put the house in order. I'll help you. Do you mind?" "No, not at all." Tiffany smiled. Who wouldn't want help under these circumstances? "Thank you." All day long, Oscar and Tiffany tidied up the house. The first thing the man did was to take away the boards that had been used to board up the windows and fix the doors, which had fallen apart. Tiffany got to work scrubbing the floors and windows. After removing the old curtains, she poured water into a basin and prepared to wash. But Oscar stopped her. "You shouldn't have such old curtains in the house, Tiffany." "So what am I going to do without curtains?" "We'll put up new ones," Oscar said confidently. "Where are we going to get them?" wondered the woman. "If we look hard enough, we'll find them," said the forester in a mysterious tone. Tiffany shrugged her shoulders. The day was drawing to a close. Tiffany had already boiled the potatoes, cut the sausage, and opened a can of stew. "Your son was very thoughtful, not daring to leave him in the woods without food," Oscar said, but he immediately regretted it. Tiffany grew sad again, thinking, "Yes, that's the way it is. Raising my only son. You spare nothing for him, and he takes you to the woods, to a cold hut," she sighed. "Don't worry so much, Tiffany. People live everywhere, and you're your own here. This is your homeland. The Karelian forest. It has some kind of ancestral memory, protects those who were born and grew up under its pines. Everything will be all right." I know, the man smiled. Tiffany thought. What brings him here? He's certainly not from around here. Tiffany and Oscar became friends. The woodsman visited the woman every day, helping her with chores. Oscar fixed furniture that Tiffany remembered from when she was a little girl. He brought water, helped with firewood. Tiffany fed him a delicious lunch. I saw lights on in some of the houses, people living. "I guess they're not leaving," she asked Oscar one day. "They are. There are 10 houses left from the whole village," he replied. "Mostly the ones the children don't need, and the lonely old people." "What do they do here? Who keeps cattle?" "The vegetable garden feeds them. They go to the forest to gather berries and mushrooms. They catch fish in the lake, then sell them in town. And there's nothing else to do here. Televisions aren't always on." "Do they have televisions in the houses?" Tiffany got excited. She was bored alone. She was also bored with the soap operas she liked to watch in the city in the evenings. "Yes, but the connection sometimes goes down, especially in the winter." Tiffany suddenly got up from the table and went to the wardrobe. There were things that Miles had hastily thrown into bags. She found among them her card, which was to be used to pay the woman's work and pension. Here she handed the card to the forester. "This is my card." "What is it?" The man didn't understand. "I beg you, let's go to the shop and buy me a TV set." "Please," she asked, her palms folded across her chest. Oscar thought for a moment. The nearest shop was 80 kilometers away. It would take all day to get there and back. But Tiffany looked at him with such pleading eyes that he couldn't refuse her. "All right, we'll take my car tomorrow," the man agreed. Tiffany smiled happily. She was growing to like this strong man with such a familiar name. He reminded her very much of her father. 2 months passed, summer came. One warm evening, Oscar and Tiffany were having tea in the yard. The forester had made a small table. Tiffany tied a tablecloth on it. The trees swayed quietly around them, enjoying the pleasant company and tranquility. The woman suddenly thought that nothing ever just happens. Perhaps she should have come back here a long time ago, she wondered to herself. She liked preparing the vegetable garden for planting. She liked setting up the house, making it cozy. Tiffany, Oscar said to her, "You and I are both old. We live here together and we don't seem to get bored." "What's there to be bored about?" "I'll plant a vegetable garden soon and then I'll take care of it," Tiffany told him. "Yes, a vegetable garden is certainly something to do. But that's not what I meant." "Well, Tiffany, let's live together." The woman looked at Oscar in surprise. In his kind eyes there was so much hope, warmth, life experience. "We're hardly ever apart, Oscar. I mean, let's live together, run the household, and watch your TV series in the evenings." He looked so touching in his uncertainty that Tiffany couldn't stand it and held out her hand to him. "Come on, Oscar. It really is more fun together." Without hiding his joy, the man put his arms around Tiffany, held her tightly against him, and stroked her gray hair. One day, returning from the forest, Oscar brought a small fawn into the house. The animal was wounded and looked weak, almost lifeless. "What's wrong with it, Oscar?" Tiffany asked, putting aside the basin of laundry. "He's trapped, the little fellow. I guess the poachers were at it again. I had to rescue the little lynx." "Wow, a lynx. He's healthier than a big cat," said Oscar. "Bring the first aid kit, please." He treated the wound on the lynx's leg, applied a bandage with ointment, and calmed the animal down. He'll stay with us for a while and then we'll see. An old dog box was re-equipped for the lynx. We had to renew the boards and make an enclosure out of metal mesh. The lynx was named Rex. This was the name of the previous owner of the box. But he was a dog, not a wild cat. The pet was very affectionate, licking Tiffany's hand as she stroked and bandaged him. A few days later, Oscar returned with a large box. There were 12 chickens in it. "That's not nothing," he said proudly, showing Tiffany the chickens lurking at the bottom of the carton. "Now we'll always have fresh eggs." "Oh my God, Oscar, where are we going to keep them?" Tiffany spluttered. "It's not a problem. Tomorrow morning I'll start building a chicken coop, and then I'll build a stable. We'll have a cow, goats, geese, piglets. We'll have our own farm." Tiffany only shook her head, smiling and enjoying Oscar's thriftiness. It was not a problem for him to get the wood to build buildings. That's why Oscar decided not to be petty. And in just a month, not only the barn, the chicken coop and the pen for geese and ducks, but also a new bathhouse grew in the yard of the house. Tiffany was overjoyed when the first smoke appeared from the chimney. "In time, we'll renovate the house," Oscar promised. "As long as I have the strength, I'll do it all." Once a month, Tiffany and Oscar drove into town to withdraw money from their cards and get Oscar's salary. At the same time, they would stop by the market and sell eggs, milk, and poultry to the vendors. The price was not high, but they did not want to trade themselves. They had to go back and do farming. Having made the necessary purchases, they would go home. One day on their way back, they noticed a car on a forest road. "It's not ours, some tourists, probably," Oscar suggested and pulled up next to the unfamiliar car. "Hello. Do you need any help?" "Good evening." A man in his 40s approached Oscar. "My car broke down. No matter how hard I try, it won't start." "Let me have a look," the forester offered. He looked under the bonnet of the foreign car, touched and moved something. "It's bad, it needs repair," said Oscar. "Where is there to repair?" asked the man. "I looked on the navigator. There are no settlements nearby." Two boys of about 8 or 10 years old jumped out of the strange man's car. They were followed by a woman. Oscar looked at the family and said decisively, "Let's go to our place. Tomorrow morning I'll take you to the service. There's a cable." The men hooked the foreign car with the cable, and everyone settled down. Oscar dragged the broken car to the village. "Here we are," he said. And Tiffany, inviting the guests in, added, "Come inside." She led the woman and her children inside. It turned out they had traveled a long way. "We've wanted to see the local sights for a long time, but the car was a little slow," the woman said. "My name is Natalie, and these are our sons Miles and Nicholas." The boys sat down near the enclosure with a lynx, looking at it in surprise. Everything in the house and in the yard seemed strange. In the evening, everyone gathered round the table outside. Oscar and Natalie's husband Travis grilled meat on the barbecue, and the women prepared vegetables and herbs. For such an occasion, Oscar got a bottle of moonshine from somewhere. To getting acquainted to meeting. "Here's to your car being repaired quickly," he said, pouring it into shot glasses. Everyone present supported him. The evening was wonderful. Natalie put the children to bed in the house. They barely made it to bed. The hosts and guests all sat around talking, drinking fragrant tea with forest herbs. And the next day, Travis's car was taken to the service center. It turned out that it would be ready only the next day, and the men returned to Oscar and Tiffany's house. The guests had brightened up the homeowners' lives. All day the boys tended to the animals, fed carrots to the rabbits, carried hay for the cow and collected eggs in the hen house, and then drank steamed milk. Travis and Oscar chopped wood and stacked it in a neat stack, and the women cooked meals. In the evening, everyone went to the lake, swam and boated, and when they returned, a real bathhouse was waiting for them. It was a wonderful weekend. Thank you, the guests thanked the hospitable hosts. We could not even imagine that this is such a wonderful holiday, and we really enjoyed it. Come back again, Oscar said, shaking Travis' hand in farewell. You bet we will, and we'll bring our friends with us, he promised, as the car with the new friends drove off down the street. Oscar said to Tiffany, I think it's time to start building guest houses. All summer, Tiffany worked in the vegetable garden, harvesting crops and making preparations for the winter. Oscar got serious about building an addition to the house. He enjoyed having visitors, and in his heart he hoped that Travis would keep his promise and come on holiday to visit them. The man and woman went to the woods to pick berries and mushrooms, made jam and pickled vegetables, and in the long winter Tiffany knitted warm socks, mittens, and other things from the rabbit's wool. So the winter flew by, followed by spring. The elderly couple's household gradually expanded, and the chores became more troublesome. One evening they were finishing digging a plot of land for planting potatoes, when suddenly a few cars drove up to the house one after another. Who's that, Oscar? Tiffany wondered. Let's see, replied her husband, and went to the gate. Travis walked towards him. Well done, master, he shouted when he saw Oscar. How are you? Are you well? Healthy, thank God, he said. Tiffany, look who's here. The men hugged each other, happy to see each other. Will you take me in? I want to stay for a week, go fishing, walk in the woods. Just relax, Travis asked. Why do you ask? We are only glad to have such guests. Oscar smiled, patting his friend on the shoulder. But you see, I didn't come alone. How many of you are there? Asked the owner. Is this all of you coming to our place? He pointed to the cars. Yeah, we'll sort it out among the guests. People started pouring out of the cars. Men, women, children. And before Tiffany could catch her breath, she was surrounded by young women, shaking hands and calling out their names, asking her where to take her things and her groceries. To the house, girls, to the house, Tiffany replied, confused. Gradually, things calmed down and there was no more fuss. The women began to prepare the food, and the men set up some tents in the yard. What clever people, Tiffany thought. The children had beds in the house and the adults were in the yard. The noise, the fun, the joy of the children's voices settled into Tiffany and Oscar's previously quiet home for a week. The children enjoyed feeding the animals, going to the lake with their parents, and playing outside. The women helped Tiffany, even though she refused to help. After all, people were here on holiday. The men had plenty to do all day long, and they enjoyed it all because of the variety. Oscar even took the guests hunting, and how they enjoyed fishing. Tiffany collected gifts for the guests: socks and mittens made of rabbit wool, jam made of wild berries, pickled and salted mushrooms, and smoked fish caught by the guests themselves. For a long time the hosts hugged and could not part with their guests. They had become so close during that week, and when the townspeople left, Tiffany found money and a card under the tablecloth in the room, wishing them well and hoping they would meet again. So we've made our first money on our farm, Oscar smiled happily. He felt that soon there would be new guests in the house, and he was not mistaken. A week later, another group of 3 families arrived. Travis told me you guys have a great holiday here, said a man named Scott. It's a good holiday. Come on in the yard, Oscar said. Rumors abound, but good things come to good. A few years flew by unnoticed. Now, from May to September, tourists from different cities came to visit Tiffany and Oscar, some for a day or two, and some for a week. Oscar had built several summer houses, bought 2 boats, and installed a drip irrigation system. People from megalopolises and noisy cities liked to relax surrounded by wild, untouched nature. The hosts did not demand payment for accommodation and did not set any rates. After all, the guests helped them in many ways. But the tourists always left money, which Oscar invested in new buildings, the purchase of fodder for cattle and other necessary things. That day they were waiting for the next guests. "Look, someone is coming," Oscar shouted to the woman. "I think it's ours." A black Jeep stopped at the gate, and a man got out. He looked with surprise at the good house with beautiful carved plait bands, at the strange man, at the links in the enclosure. "Don't you recognize him?" "My son is here," Tiffany said quietly, shielding her eyes from the sun with her hand. She took a few steps forward and smiled, bowing her head. "Hello, son." "Hello." Walter's legs gave out at the sight of his mother, healthy, beautiful, and cheerful. He hugged his mother and sobbed, stroking her head. Tiffany softly spoke the words that Oscar had once said to her. "This is our homeland here, son, the Maine woods. It somehow keeps the memory of our ancestors alive, protects those who were born and raised beneath its pines. It's going to be okay. I know it will." Pitiful technician's daughter. "You'll never get out of the mud," laughed her classmates. And 15 years later, Carolina sat at the railway station on her day off and looked hopefully at the people passing by her. On a small table in front of the girl were laid out a variety of papier-mâché figures, very skillful, and hand-colored with acrylic paints, small animals, birds, scenes from children's fairy tales. All this regularly attracted the attention of potential buyers. Except that, having learnt the price, they immediately turned away sullenly with the words, "Why is it so expensive? My Thomas can make such nonsense in a couple of minutes, and paint it even faster. What's all this money for?" Caroline only pressed her lips together in embarrassment. She was asking for nothing. But the inhabitants of their provincial town, who were used to saving money on almost everything, did not want to pay for the labor of her invalid father, even if she was also thrown into the mud every time. "What kind of an exclusive you have that you ask so much?" Caroline tried to sell figurines at the railway station in the hope that some of the capital's tourists would be able to appreciate these creations. But she was quickly kicked out. She was told to pay a percentage or get out. Carolina wouldn't have minded paying for her workplace, but the amount the racketeers told her was a mockery, 10,000 a day. "Where am I going to get that kind of money?" she asked the big man in the tracksuit, who was not shy of smoking a stinking cigarette in front of her. "In a month, God willing, I'll be able to earn at least half of that." The burly man exhaled the acrid smoke into the girl's face with relish, then smiled wryly. "Well, it's what you wanted, baby. This is big business, by the way. If you want, you can always pay for the place in kind." The man gave the girl a steely stare that made Caroline want to wash herself at once. "Don't," she muttered grimly, lowering her gaze. "I'll pack everything up and go now, then." The bully hummed disappointedly. Caroline shook her head negatively. We could make a deal." The creep held out his big tobacco-smelling hand to Caroline. However, the girl staggered sharply to the side, warningly. "I'm going to scream or call the police for help. Just try to touch me." The jock lowered his hand, and for a second it hovered in the air a centimeter from her face. Then he grinned and said playfully, "And you're not stupid at all, and you're beautiful. You shouldn't want to join our company. You should buy yourself some clothes. You walk around like a bum in your last rags." "I don't mess with bandits," the girl answered him in a serious tone and began to put her rustic luggage into a small sports bag given to her by her father. She was about to leave the platform when the bandit suddenly blocked her way with his massive torso. He looked down at her like she was a bug and smiled nastily at her. "Let me through," the girl mumbled without looking at him. The boogeyman in reply bent closer to her and in a low voice said threateningly, "You think properly, Caroline," he exhaled along with another puff of smoke. Her name. "You'd be better off with me, and it's in your best interest. You're almost out of high school. Where do you go from here? Do you know the connections I have in this town? If I say the word, no one will hire you. Not even as a cleaner. So you won't be able to continue your mum's career. I'll take care of that." "There's already someone to take care of me," replied the girl, boldly looking the scoundrel in the eye. "I said I won't come here again. Let me pass. Or I'll really call the police now." "Is this about your daddy?" or what? The man grinned and gave a bullhorn with the toe of his trainers. "He won't help you, if anything. And the police here think they all work for me." The thug looked around and added briefly, "Anyway, I've told you everything. Don't you say anything to him, and don't you pawn me off." Carolina, who turned 17 earlier this year, did look a little older than her age, trim thanks to daily jogging and her technician mother's help cleaning the shops. And at the same time, slim as a graceful rose, she was admired by almost all the boys at school. However, because of the low social status of her family, no one, except for such criminals as this big guy was he himself looked no more than 20, did not consider the girl as a love interest. Caroline herself never looked for romantic adventures and devoted all her free time exclusively to helping her parents. But even if this scoundrel had suddenly turned out to be the last man on earth, she would never have agreed to be his date. The girl saw a couple of times as near the only nightclub in their town, gangsters like him left in the arms of young, disappointed, dressed in short skirts. Caroline didn't have to guess who they were. She was old enough to realize how complicated real life was. But even in her worst dream, the girl couldn't imagine such a shameful future awaiting her. "I'll give you a sweet life in this little town. Don't doubt it," said the scoundrel. Standing before this unpleasant force, Caroline began to feel herself slowly but surely overcome by fear. After all, she was all alone in the station, and there was no one to protect her. Fortunately, at that moment, the villain's mobile phone rang, and Caroline, taking advantage of the fact that he was distracted, hurriedly slipped out of the bandit's sight. She returned home that day depressed and penniless. It was the last Sunday in May, which meant that she had the longest and most horrible week before graduation ahead of her. All her classmates would only talk about who and what dress to wear, and what hairstyle and manicure to choose for this important holiday. And guys will try as soon as possible to invite the prettiest girls of the school to the ball. And only Caroline, of course, no one will be invited to spend time at the last school party in her life. Nor will she have any dress, shoes, or manicure. "Honey, are you okay, Jennifer?" the girl's mother inquired cautiously. "You're all pale today. Didn't manage to sell anything at all." Caroline covered her eyes with her hands, unable to hold back the tears that were about to spill. "My girl, what's wrong? Has someone hurt you?" the woman asked again, clasping her crying daughter to her side. "I don't want to go to this stupid prom," Caroline finally managed to utter, trying to control her sobs. Jennifer stroked her daughter's soft, dark blonde, shiny hair and looked into her lovely golden brown eyes. "Honey, but prom is one of the most important days in any girl's life, isn't it? Are you sure you want to miss such an important event? There won't be a second time like this in your life," her mother warned her. Caroline only sobbed a couple of times, then sat down on the bed and began to wipe her eyes thoroughly with a handkerchief. "And it's a good thing it won't," she said. "What haven't I seen at this feast of female vanity? The guests will all do nothing but show off their expensive dresses to each other and drink cheap red wine, while the class teacher and the principal discuss the biggest gossip of the year in a corner of the gym." Jennifer smiled at her daughter, but Caroline saw a slight sadness in that smile. "Are you really that worried about not having anything to wear?" she asked affectionately. "I've already put some money aside for you for a dress. And the shoes, you can have my shoes. Do you remember the loafers like that? I married your father in them." Her mother's eyes clouded with unpleasant memories. Sometimes Caroline marveled at how much her parents loved each other, even though they had lived together for many years and endured hardships. Jennifer had come to this town from a remote village where she had been raised by her grandmother until she came of age. Unfortunately, Jennifer was never able to enroll in any educational institution to continue her studies. The knowledge she received in the village was barely enough to keep her from starving. The young girl was offered only low-skilled work as a cleaner, or, even worse, openly obscene offers. In order to get a foothold in this place and make ends meet, Caroline's mother got a job as a floor cleaner in the office of a taxi company near the station. It was there that she met Michael, her future husband. Michael had been working as a taxi driver for several years and was earning quite well. He was immediately attracted to a modest, pretty cleaner who came to their town from the province. Her purity and openness touched the heart of the man, so that soon the taxi driver invited the girl to the first date, after which he and Jennifer began to officially meet. About a year later, the couple planned a wedding, after which the young people happily lived in marriage for almost 10 years. During this time, they had Caroline, a charming daughter, the name Jennifer gave because of her great love for the flower of the same name. All this time, the woman continued to work in a taxi park, and her husband to drive the residents to the suburbs. The salary received by Jennifer was not large, but thanks to Michael, their small family steadfastly kept afloat, being able, though not lavish, but to buy everything necessary for life. The year that little Caroline turned 11, however, disaster came knocking. Michael was driving an elderly couple from the village back to the city. The weather that autumn was very wet, and it was raining constantly. Because of this, the driver had to be doubly attentive on the wet road, making sure that he could fit into the next corner or brake in time at the traffic lights. The elderly people Michael was driving, as it turned out, were very unrestrained and overly emotional. The elderly people Michael was driving were, as luck would have it, very unrestrained and overly emotional. They were constantly dissatisfied with something and threatened to write a complaint against the taxi driver. Because of this, Caroline's father now and then distracted from the road, trying to pacify the nagging couple. At one of these sensitive moments, the man missed a warning sign and, unable to control himself, smashed through an iron fence, sending him and his passengers into a ditch. The car flipped several times on the steep slope before stopping its fateful course. As luck would have it, the elderly couple were virtually unhurt, with only a few scratches, while Michael's life hung in the balance. His right arm was damaged so badly that the man risked dying at any moment due to heavy blood loss. Doctors miraculously managed to save his life, but the mutilated arm, alas, had to be amputated. When the taxi driver regained consciousness, he could not believe what had happened for a long time. How could it be? He was the breadwinner of the family. What would happen to his wife and daughter? Jennifer managed with great difficulty to calm him down and assure him that life goes on. No matter what happened, they would always be together. And she would do whatever was necessary to get them through these hard times. Since then, Caroline's mother has had to work 3 times as hard, taking extra shifts at the city hospital as well as at her daughter's school. Although Michael fell into a brief apathy at first, soon enough he was able to pull himself together. After all, with one arm or two, he continued to be the head of the family and could not allow himself to be completely supported by his wife and daughter. Caroline was by then already actively helping her mother. The man began to develop his left arm and look for ways to earn an alternative income. Naturally, working in a taxi was out of the question. After another 6 months, he mastered the art of creating papier-mâché figurines and weaving baskets from vines, for which he traveled to the nearest forest, where he collected suitable wood. Persistent and strong-minded, Michael was ready to sell the fruits of his labor himself. But to this occupation, all the local men who personally knew Caroline's father treated not so much with contempt, but rather with a slight sneer. They said that he had been a normal man, driving people around, and now he had stooped to selling baskets in the street. Then Caroline offered her father to sit instead of him on a busy shopping street of the town with his daughter. "Is it enough for you to walk the corridors to class with your mother?" she asked. The father refused at first out of pride. "It's not good enough for you. I understand how your classmates look at you because of that," he said. Caroline was embarrassed, but tried to brush it off. "To hell with them," the girl answered him, smiling. "I'm not doing this to amuse them, but because we need the money. You spend a lot of time on this weaving and figurines, and women are much more willing to buy such things. What about your studies?" Her father looked at her doubtfully. "What about my studies? Studying won't run away," Caroline answered him simply. "I will trade at weekends, and first I will try the squares, or the markets, then I'll go to the railway station. A lot of people pass by there during the day. Maybe we'll make some money." Michael furtively brushed a large tear from the corner of his eye. He thanked God every day for giving him such a beautiful, understanding, and supportive family. He could hardly have dreamed of anything more in his life, except that it was a little hard without a hand. "All right," he agreed, "but only after work, straight home. I don't want you to fall behind in your classes because of this." "Don't worry," laughed back her daughter. "I learn new material quickly. As my teachers tell me, everything will be fine." Caroline shook her father's hand encouragingly and thought about how much she loved her family. For the sake of these people, she was ready to endure any difficulties, as long as they were healthy, fed, and had the opportunity to meet each new day with joy. Michael not unreasonably worried about the attitude of classmates to his daughter. No matter how friendly Caroline tried to behave with them, the school community flatly refused to accept her. Although the girl turned out to be the most attractive, not at all awkward in the class, and regularly received only excellent grades in physical education, other, more successful classmates only did that sought to tease Caroline at every opportunity. "What, Carolina? Are you preparing for your after-school program again?" Vanessa, the first beauty of the class, mocked her in the locker room. "Let me guess. Do you have an extra class today to carry buckets of water or not?" "Oh wait, must be obstacle course practice. You're jumping up and down the stairs with a mop?" Vanessa was laughing a hysterical, unpleasant laugh. Caroline had to restrain herself from saying something equally caustic and unflattering. The girl tried to avoid school fights, but it did not mean that she was ready to tolerate such an attitude to herself until the end of her senior year. "Vanessa, you'd better finish taking your weight loss supplements," she said calmly, tying her old trainers. The classmates' laughter broke off abruptly. "I'm serious. It's already melted your brains. You're laughing like a lunatic." Vanessa's face instantly contorted into a grimace of anger and disgust. Caroline realized she'd guessed right. Vanessa had been frantically trying to lose weight for the past few months to fit into the designer dress her parents had promised her for the prom. The only problem was that the size range of such outfits ended exclusively at size 42. "You little brat, you filthy little brat. You'll never get married with such a horrible pedigree. So you're wasting your time training and running 5 kilometers a day." The girl was ready to run even 10 kilometers. She spat out in anger. "The most you can be in this town is an elite call girl. And that's if you don't despise sleeping with a girl who's been mudding like a pig since high school." Vanessa threw with all her might at Caroline a dirty rag that the cleaning lady had left in the locker room so she wouldn't have to go far to get a change of clothes. The piece of cloth fell on Carolina's head with a loud smack, and all the girls in the room burst out laughing. "Serves her right, you upstart. Show her where she belongs, will you?" Vanessa was taunted by her friends. "You think you can open your filthy mouth here?" Caroline was shaking like a fever. She had never felt such hatred from others. More than anything else in the world, she wanted to disappear, to dissolve like vapor from water on a hot surface. She didn't realize how she had shouted in her heart to all those puffed-up puppets. Choke on your anger. All you know is to wash the bones of blokes, don't you? You have no interests in each other's lives except money and rags. I hate you all, you puffed-up pussies. Caroline didn't realize how she had jumped out of the changing room. The girl rushed past all the other students and ran down the corridor right into the street. Once she was in the school stadium, she heard a chant. Caroline. Class hadn't started yet. Where are you going? Harry, the gym teacher, shouted after her. But the girl didn't listen to him. She ran 5 laps in a row before her heart was able to beat again. Caroline didn't know where she got her ability to run, but she was sure that everything in life is given to a person for a reason. And if she had the opportunity to develop this ability, then she should use it, especially since running was the only thing that helped her calm down and bring her chaotic thoughts into relative order. Trying to regain her breath, Caroline approached her classroom. The boys, lined up in a row and unaware of what had recently happened in the girls' locker room, looked at their classmate with surprise, and some with outright envy. Watch and learn. The gym teacher waved his hand in Carolina's direction. 3 kilometers in 10 minutes. And your shoes are ready to be included in the Olympic team. Not like you idiots. To the left, go, 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 go. There was a loud whistle, and Carolina's classmates, with dejected faces, ran their standard 6 laps. Well done, Caroline. Harry patted her on the shoulder. Take a rest, bye. It's the first time I've seen results like yours in 5 years. A real talent. The gym teacher shook his head and went off to follow the older students, while Caroline sat on the sports bench and pondered his words. Sure, it was a little late for her to start a sports career, but could her running talents be applied in a more productive way? The answer to this question the girl has not yet found for herself, precisely because of the incident in the locker room, and also because of a series of regular petty bullying from other girls. Caroline did not want to go to the prom. However, Jennifer still managed to persuade her daughter not to miss such a momentous event. After all, it's better to take your diploma from them right away, so that you don't have to go there again, the understanding mother winked. But you must never show them that you are scared. And if you don't come to the graduation, that's exactly what you'll show them. Let's not give them something to gossip about. Okay, Caroline sighed heavily, but agreed. Okay, let this be my last fight. Jennifer helped to choose and buy for her daughter the most beautiful dress they could find in an inexpensive second-hand shop, a simple cut, but at the same time very elegant and refined dress in the shade of sapphire, which perfectly emphasized Caroline's slender, athletic figure and perfectly set off the noble and yet completely natural color of her hair. The wedding shoes, which Jennifer lent to her daughter, perfectly matched the outfit and Caroline's high hairstyle, which she had also made herself. It's a pity I don't have any jewelry at all, Jennifer complained, looking sadly at the girl's festive look. Why not? Michael suddenly joined the gathering and grinned slyly at his favorite women. Dad, are you what? Caroline looked at him uncertainly, and in her eyes Michael read anxiety and worry. Don't tell me you bought something for me. It ended sadly, Caroline said with a smile. I did. Her father nodded with a smile and pulled a small velvet box out of his shirt pocket. Caroline was incredibly embarrassed. Not only had her mother bought her a dress that was simply magical by the girl's standards, but her father had managed to throw away a considerable amount of money for her. Why? Caroline asked him guiltily. But Michael had already reached out to her and put a box in her hand. It's a little miracle. Open it, he said. Caroline opened the lid with a sinking heart. On a white velvet cushion lay a tiny gold pendant in the shape of a star. The five-pointed beauty shone proudly with its rays, even though it was no bigger than a fingernail on Caroline's index finger. Each ray of the star ended in a tiny shining crystal, and when the light fell on the stones, they lit up a myriad of colored lights. "Oh my God, it's beautiful." Mother and daughter exhaled almost simultaneously. Michael smiled and said to the girl, "Caroline, I want you to know that you, for me, will always be a guiding star that will not let me go astray from the right course. You and Mum are my two brightest stars." With these words, the man hugged first his wife with one arm and then his daughter, who clung to her father's strong and reliable shoulder. "Thank you, Daddy," Caroline said through tears of gratitude. "I will never take it off. I will always wear it as a talisman." Michael agreed with his daughter that he would pick her up from school in the evening after the party was over. It got dark early in their neighborhood, and teenagers, when they're drunk, are a mess. You never know what to expect from them. So her father decided to insure the girl in case the drunken classmates suddenly wanted to afford too much. When Caroline entered the assembly hall, where the event was held, many of her classmates quieted down, not immediately recognizing the girl. She looked around, deciding where she could best sit so as not to draw too much attention to herself. When Vanessa suddenly appeared on the horizon, like a shark's fin in the middle of a calm ocean. The queen never walks alone. For some reason, Caroline thought at that moment the first beauty of the class was accompanied by her own entourage, consisting of 3 girls and 2 guys. And the whole company was heading straight for her. Caroline noted to herself that Vanessa didn't wear the desired dress from a famous designer. Apparently, she couldn't fit herself to the notorious beauty standards of the famous brand. Instead, Vanessa wore a perfectly tight, extremely short leather dress, whose coloring was somewhere in the middle between a flesh tone and the color of bronze powder. Good thing it doesn't blend in completely, Caroline thought. Otherwise, you'd think she'd come completely unclothed. "Well, here's our Cinderella," Vanessa said, stretching her vowels. "Cute dress. Did you get it secondhand? It's okay. It's okay. You can wear it once, and then it'll be handy for scrubbing floors." Caroline gritted her teeth to keep from telling her what she thought of her provocative outfit. At that moment, Vanessa noticed the gold pendant around her neck. How lovely. The classmate's eyes flashed, and she reached out her hand to touch the jewel. "Don't touch it," Caroline sharply brushed her fingers away. "It's a present from Daddy," she said with a caustic grin. "It hurts." Vanessa replied with a scornful arch of her eyebrow. "It's just a cheap thing you bought on sale anyway." "If I asked, my parents would give me a dozen of them," Vanessa said. She turned and led the other boys, who followed reluctantly after their leader. Caroline chuckled softly. It seemed that Vanessa's superiority was beginning to bore even her most devoted fans. After the graduation ceremony, the real disco began. Under the influence of good mood, invigorating music and hot drinks, everyone danced. As they say, who can do what they like? Caroline did not dance. She wanted to leave immediately after receiving her papers. But the headmistress asked her to stay and be with the guys a little longer, because it was the last time we were all together. Although Caroline was not particularly eager to continue the evening, she gave in to the headmistress' request. When the slow dance sounded, the hall was illuminated with soft and languid light. The girl saw someone approaching her. The figure emerging from the pink smoke was Andrew, Vanessa's boyfriend. "Hi, Caroline," Andrew began, smiling languidly. "You look really good tonight. Can I ask you to dance?" Caroline was embarrassed. She realized that something was wrong. Why would Vanessa's boyfriend ask her to slow dance? "Wouldn't your lover be angry?" She tried to joke. She couldn't believe that the most handsome guy in the school wanted to dance with her. A slight shadow ran across the guy's face. "No, she won't. I'm sick of her," he rolled his eyes. "All I hear every day is, 'Andrew, am I pretty, Andrew? Am I pretty, Andrew? Have I lost weight?' The scales don't seem to be reading right, and so on and so forth. It became impossible to communicate with her. Caroline held back a laugh. No one had ever portrayed Vanessa so vividly and seemingly. Yes, she's very fond of herself, the girl nodded. Okay, but just one dance. I have to go home soon. If you say so, beautiful lady. Andrew smiled and, making an elegant gesture, offered his hand to the girl. Caroline danced a slow dance for the first time in her life. It was an amazing, unlike anything she had ever felt before. It was as if a whole swarm of small colored hummingbirds had been released inside her, and the tiny birds were flying all over her body, giving every movement of the girl a truly airy lightness. Andrew looked at her so intently, as if he really wondered what Caroline was like. What kind of person was she? What is she like? Immersed in her romantic thoughts, Caroline did not immediately notice a figure with a touch of bronze powder flashed behind her. "Get out of here," Vanessa hissed. Caroline had no time to react when Andrew's strong hands grabbed her by the shoulders and turned her around to face her rich classmate. In the next second, Vanessa spewed a huge amount of tomato juice from a paper bag at her with all her might. Caroline gasped at the nasty, brackish taste. The first minute she was afraid that she had poured real pig's blood on her, like in a popular horror film. "Drink, drink, you cesspit," Vanessa said, pouring juice all over the unfortunate classmate. "You miserable fool. What are you doing? Did you really believe Andrew just wanted to dance with you? You thought he liked you?" Vanessa tilted her head and started laughing like a lunatic. The smoke and the light made it look like Caroline had been doused with something black like tar. "Stop it, stop it. Vanessa, you're crazy," Caroline shouted back at her, trying to get out of Andrew's grasp. He released her, and she began to shake off the sticky, salty liquid. Her dress was hopelessly ruined, as was her hair. And what was most tragic of all, her mum's wedding shoes. "God, how can you be such a monster, Vanessa?" Caroline asked her in despair. "Why do you hate me so much?" Vanessa condescended to answer, smiling with all her 32 teeth. "It's a joy to hate you. I despise you, Caroline, because people like you are always trying to get out of your dirty hole, like mice waiting for someone to deliver cheese for them outside. You should know your place and keep your head down," Vanessa said. "What do you think? I didn't see you flashing your legs at our boys in gym class." "What, Caroline?" From the shock, Caroline struggled to speak. "Vanessa, come on. I'm just a good runner. And it's nobody's fault that you can't stop eating fries in packs." Apparently, that last remark had finally pissed Vanessa off, and all the anger and meanness that had been in her until that moment came out. She took a swing at her classmate. Vanessa sharply lowered her perfectly manicured hand and grabbed the chain around Caroline's neck and pulled off the pendant Michael had given her. "Did you think you could be better than me?" Vanessa whispered, clutching Caroline's gold star in her fist. "But I have money and social standing, and all you have is your filthy rag, which you will use every day for the rest of your life to mop the floors of this school or some rundown hospital on the outskirts of town." Caroline lunged for the wretch, but Andrew grabbed her arms, preventing her from resisting Vanessa. Give it back now," the girl shouted tearfully. "You have no right to even touch him. You're the most disgusting person I've ever known. Give me the pendant back." Vanessa held the pendant up to Caroline's face, knowing full well that she couldn't take it away from her. Then she released the chain from her fingers, and the little star swung in front of her nose like a hypnotist's pendulum. "You're a pathetic cleaning lady's daughter, and you'll never get close to being a normal person," Vanessa said in a thick, low voice. "Repeat after me. I know my place, Vanessa, and I'm the pathetic daughter of a maintenance worker." "Go to hell," Vanessa, Caroline said, glaring hatefully at the blonde in the leather dress. The resentment swept over her head, preventing her from snapping out of the feeling of all-consuming anger. "Do it again, or you'll never see your jewel again," Vanessa whispered again. She wanted to throw the pendant on the floor to crush it with the heel of her lacquered shoes. But at that moment the general light flashed brightly, and the teenagers saw Megan's headmistress looking at them with all the sternness she was capable of. "What the hell is going on here, Vanessa?" she asked the rich alumna angrily. Then she glared menacingly at Andrew, who instantly released Caroline. The girl didn't hold back her feelings and slapped the henchman with an impressive slap. "You filthy henchman," Caroline said through gritted teeth. Then she held out her open palm to Vanessa. "Give it back. What you took now." Vanessa. The headmistress looked at her reproachfully. Vanessa put the pendant back into Caroline's palm, being careful not to touch her, after defiantly wiping her hands on her dress. "Megan, can I go home?" Shaking with humiliation and resentment, Caroline asked her. "My dad is probably waiting for me outside." She realized that at that moment she had become an absolute laughingstock in front of all the students and teachers at her school. Megan looked at the girl with genuine regret and said briefly, "Of course, dear, go. Have a happy life after school," she added belatedly. But Caroline was already closing the doors to the assembly hall behind her, and at the same time to this horrible part of her now definitive past. After graduation, Carolina had been in a terrible state. For almost a month, not wanting to go out, she hadn't discussed what had happened with her parents. When Michael met her at the school and saw in what moral and physical state is his daughter, the man was ready to tear and throw. "Daughter, just tell me, who are the bastards who did this to you? They're your classmates, right?" "What difference does it make?" Caroline waved it off. "Forget it, Dad. It was just some fools playing a joke on me like that. Luckily, I don't have to hang out with any of them anymore. I can't even see this school. Let's go home." The distraught father calmed his daughter down as best he could, but he returned home feeling quite upset. His sacred duty was to protect his daughter's own blood. And now this. And Caroline, a light-hearted person, flatly refused to reveal the names of the villains. Michael could not, with all his will, break into the school and shake this information out of the teachers. Jennifer reassured her husband, saying that if her daughter didn't want to talk about it, then there was no need to get involved, so she had to deal with it on her own. Besides, she assured her husband, "Caroline always knows that we are close by, and we will always help her with everything she needs. Our daughter is very strong. If she needs our help, you and I will know about it, believe me." Caroline, meanwhile, was lying on her bed, clutching the tattered chain of her pendant in her hand. It wasn't even the dress or the nasty words Vanessa had said that hurt the most. Most of all, Caroline was tormented by anger for the spoiled gift of her father. She realized that the chain could be repaired, but she didn't want to burden her parents with it, telling them that she had just taken the pendant off and put it back to her. Caroline contemplated her future. Now that the hated school was over, the girl could for the first time consciously choose what to do with her life next. She realized that she had no prospects in this city. But to enter a good university in the capital also required a lot of money. And where to get it from? A regular part-time job. From the backwoods. And Caroline couldn't just leave her parents like that. They needed help, including material aid. The girl listed in her mind what she could do best. But alas, the list wasn't that long. Running, cooking, and the ability to wax floors to a shine. God, Caroline thought, was Vanessa right after all. And I'm not going to get anywhere in this life with these opportunities. Bitter tears ran down her cheeks. It turned out that her classmate, without knowing it, had predicted her future. But Carolina was not one of those who let circumstances overrule her so easily. Therefore, the girl decided to do the following. She wanted to work all next year to save a sufficient amount of money. After that, the girl intended to go to try her luck in a large regional metropolis. There she wanted to take a course in her profession, and maybe, after passing it, find a good job with a decent salary in the center. Caroline realized that it would be a difficult path, but she was ready to endure everything to change her life, thus getting rid of Vanessa's humiliating prediction. Having told her parents about her plans, Caroline sighed with relief. They were not against the girl to try to find a decent job. Michael and his wife were very happy that their daughter finally began to come out of that terrible state. "I will continue to help Mom and Dad," promised Caroline. "But I have to think about my own destiny. I want you to be proud of me, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to achieve my dream." A couple of days later, Caroline took her CV to a recruitment agency. She offered her services as a maid and, if required, she could also act as a cook, preparing simple meals. To her surprise, the call came quite quickly after that. In just a week, the girl was already sitting in front of a female employee recruiting domestic staff for wealthy homes. The woman scrutinized her profile and then looked at Caroline intently in the eyes. "What about your stress tolerance? Can you handle unusual situations normally?" The girl was somewhat taken aback. It was the first time she had ever been asked such a question, but she answered nonetheless. "Depends on what you mean by the word unconventional." The recruiter raised an eyebrow that was perfectly fine, like a thread, and began to curl her fingers. "Well, for example, if you are suddenly insulted without reason, from your point of view, raise your voice at you, or, on the contrary, show you special attention, maybe even with elements of a slight flirtation." Caroline gasped in amazement. "Excuse me, do you want to employ me as a maid or, with all due respect, sell me to a not very decent establishment?" The girl realized that after such words she would probably never get a job. But she couldn't help herself. Whatever it was, she wouldn't let anyone humiliate her again. Never. The employee nodded her head briefly and made a note in her notebook. She then raised her eyes to Caroline again. "Well, you answer more or less politely. And your reaction is quite adequate. I will report these points to my superiors so that they can make a final decision. You see, you've had 3 maids leave this place before you, and every one of them felt obliged to tell me in color that they were not warned about how bad it was going to be." "Is that a warning?" I asked Caroline, just in case. "Consider it a warning," the personnel officer nodded. "Expect to be contacted within 3 days. If you are contacted within that time, you are accepted. You will learn the rest of the details of your job on the spot. And yes, I almost forgot. You will be required to live on the employer's premises for the duration of the contract." Caroline nodded in agreement. It was all very strange, but all the more exciting. She really wanted to be hired for this position. The salary was more than generous. There would be something to help her parents. And even if these unusual situations arose in the course of business, she would not give herself an offense. 2 days later, Caroline's mobile phone rang happily, informing the girl that she had been accepted as a maid in the house of a rich businessman. "Mom, Dad, hurrah. I have a job now," Caroline happily announced to her parents. "They said they would pick me up in 4 hours. "I'm going to go pack," Caroline said. Jennifer breathed a sigh of relief and crossed herself. Her husband gently hugged her with the arm that had survived the accident, and the girl's mother slowly lowered her head onto her husband's shoulder. "Here is our girl going into adulthood," she said slowly. "God, I wish she'd do well there." "Don't worry," Jenny Michael held her close. "Remember, you told me yourself that our daughter is a very strong person. She'll get through anything." When it was time to leave, it was not without tears. Her parents saw Caroline off with all the tenderness and warmth of their hearts, expecting her to come back next weekend to share her impressions of her new job. Carolina was picked up from her home 9-story building by a huge black business class UE. When the girl climbed into it, it seemed to her that she was inside a cruise liner, so huge was the space of the car interior. The driver turned out to be a not very talkative middle-aged man who calmly drove her to the desired destination. When she got out of the car, Caroline couldn't believe her eyes. In front of her stood a gigantic 4-story mansion, made in a completely modern style with glass and chrome metal constructions. Caroline thought involuntarily that the owner of this house must be very fond of shopping centers, if he had decided to live in one of them. She didn't voice these thoughts out loud, of course. Instead, she obediently followed the head housekeeper and housekeeper who led her to the pool, instructing the new employee along the way. Try not to make eye contact with Oliver when he asks you something. It's best to lower your gaze and answer in a matter-of-fact manner. If you're cleaning a room and the owner suddenly walks in, you shouldn't fuss or pretend to notice his presence. Just get on with your work. Oliver is used to all the servants moving about and working almost silently. You're part of this house, and in a way you have to blend in with it and everything that goes on here. Often we don't pay attention to the owner's little quirks, the housekeeper continued. We only call the guards if we realize that it could endanger his life and health. Caroline was silent, but she felt as if she were in some modern fairy tale about an enchanted castle where everyone was silent and could not say a word to the cruel king who ruled this high-tech kingdom. The housekeeper's last sentence, however, surprised Caroline somewhat. "Excuse me, I think you said something about quirks. May I clarify what exactly was meant?" The housekeeper stopped and looked at the girl as if she were trying to see through her thoughts with invisible X-rays. "You were not warned by the agency about possible irregularities, were you?" she asked dryly. "Do I understand correctly?" "No, why not?" "They explained to me that there were some special circumstances, but what were they?" The housekeeper raised her eyebrows elegantly. "Well then, you'll soon see for yourself." The woman led her to a large rectangular pool, on the marble terrace of which sat a young man reclining in a sun lounger. He was wearing large sunglasses, a bright red Hawaiian shirt, and white knee-length shorts. The guy looked to be about 24 to 25 years old. Judging by his relaxed manner and the way he was calmly flipping through the newspaper in his lap, he was the owner's son. Please, the housekeeper nodded to him. Caroline arrived exactly 10 minutes ago, as the master had requested. After that, the lady silently left, leaving the girl and the young man alone. "Hello," Caroline greeted him politely. "Excuse me, do you know how long we have to wait for Oliver?" The man froze, holding the newspaper half open, and then looked at the girl in surprise from under the shimmering glasses. "I don't understand," was all he could ask. "Excuse me, but you must be the son of the owner of this house, aren't you?" Caroline answered the question with a question. "I just can't get used to how many rules there are here. I wanted to ask you about them before I met Oliver," she continued. The young man continued to stare at the maid in mute amazement. She, not knowing what to do in such a delicate situation, just stood there staring back at him. Finally, the man couldn't stand it any longer and laughed loudly. Caroline felt incredibly stupid, but still managed to squeeze out a weak smile. "Honestly, I've never had one of those before," he said through his laughter and came close to Caroline. The girl blushed instantly, not knowing if she could back away from him at least a couple of steps. The master's son came so close that Caroline could feel the fabric of his fluttering shirt with her hand. "Caroline, that's your name, isn't it?" he asked with a playful smile. "Did Amanda say it right?" "Yes, that's right." Caroline looked up at him again. "Now, Caroline, the owner of the house is not coming here for the simple reason that he is already standing in front of you. I am Oliver." Caroline stood still with her mouth open in astonishment. Without another word, the young man pushed his glasses back over his eyes, and then strode off at a steady pace toward the stairs leading to his private wing. He threw her a final glance without turning round. "I like you, Caroline. You are now definitely accepted." Please tell Amanda and ask her to come and see me when she has a free moment." With these words, he disappeared, leaving Caroline in a half-faint with excitement. Caroline told the housekeeper that the master was waiting for her. She pressed her lips together and showed her into the back room, where she gave her all the necessary clothes and the key to her room. "Remember, we rise at 6, so you won't be seen or heard. And no matter how embarrassed you are, you must continue to do your job. Do you understand?" "Understood," Caroline replied, thoroughly embarrassed. Caroline went to her room to change. Thus began the working day for the girl. She soon realized what Amanda had meant when she spoke of Oliver's quirks. It turned out that he loved to host big costume parties with loud music, beautiful women, and expensive drinks. Besides Caroline herself, there were about 15 other people working in the house, and they all behaved as if they were exactly the same things in the young millionaire's mansion, like some floor vase or a painting hanging on one of the walls. It was, of course, very disconcerting to the girl that all the employees of Oliver's house were acting quietly and inconspicuously. After all, Oliver had clearly made it clear to her that he could socialize with them as ordinary people. Amanda, however, continued to insist on numerous rules of behavior even after her host had summoned her to talk to her. Well, Caroline couldn't cross her either. In the first month of work, she received a substantial advance on her card, part of which she immediately sent to her parents. Oliver remained an inscrutable mystery to her. He could easily walk up and kiss one of the young gardeners he paired with her. They were twin sisters and tended an incredibly beautiful winter garden, but at the same time he never allowed himself any flirtations of a certain kind with her or them. For these purposes, Oliver had far more experienced girls who could safely be called mistresses. One named Molly stood out among them. The long-legged, red-haired beauty spent most of her time with Oliver, and he, in turn, increasingly applied the definition of fiancé to her. The entire staff of the house concluded that soon the young people would be married and their master would have a legitimate wife. However, this eccentric rich man had a completely different side. Very often, especially in the evening, Caroline found the young man immersed in the affairs of his company. He would sit for hours at his desk, and sometimes Caroline was sure he worked all night long. She had never once heard him say a rude word to anyone in the household. And if any of the workers made serious mistakes, Oliver always spoke to them in private, locked away in his office. But his fiancée Molly did not share this peaceful coexistence with the staff. She was always picking on everything, shouting at everyone, and the young maids, including Caroline, tried to bring her to tears. "Why are you talking here during working hours?" she shouted at the girls. "Don't you have anything else to do? Look around: dust, dirt, carpets. You're not sweeping properly. Get back to work, you slackers. Well, when Oliver and I get married, I'll get to work on you. How many of you have Amanda taught you? It's all over the place. What are you looking at me for? Look me in the eye when I'm talking." Molly growled at them like a wild tigress, imagining herself the mistress of the house. The maids held on with all their might, unable to endure her terrifying screams and shrieks. God forbid Oliver should marry that Molly, one of the maids complained to her in the kitchen. "Caroline, then we'd all be ruined." "What can she do to you?" Caroline asked her with a smile. "She's not his wife yet. You're not panicking yet." Millie looked at the girl and said with bitterness in her voice, "You just don't know her, Caroline. This is not a woman. That's jealousy and greed combined. Only in stilettos. She'd run us all to pieces, I'll bet. She's jealous of her master's every plate. The other day she complained to him that we were too pretty to walk round the house and charm him with our slim legs." Beatrice and Caroline laughed together, realizing how absurd the situation was, especially when it came to a man like their master. "I can't lose this job," Beatrice continued sadly. "I have a little son in the village with my mother. I work here and send them money so that Matthew will not need anything. I understand, Caroline said. My parents have always lived very modestly in another town, so this place is a real chance for me to make a name for myself. Beatrice looked out the window at the full moon hanging over the horizon and smiled dreamily. Oliver's very good, she murmured, as if in confidence. He has his quirks, of course, but he's not as cruel as Amanda says he is. I suspect she's made him look like that to us on purpose, so that we'll work harder and not relax. He is a little strange, Caroline agreed, and looked away from Beatrice, lest she should read into it the feelings that Caroline felt every time she remembered how close Oliver had been to her. He is very young, and for the owner of such a huge company, how had he achieved all this? He inherited it 3 years ago, Beatrice replied simply. Since then, he's had these oddities of working non-stop and resting all the time. His father, Marcus, was poisoned at a business dinner. The police were never able to figure out who did it. You could say the culprit is still walking free. And Oliver is very afraid that at any moment he could be next. Really, Caroline was genuinely surprised. Well, yes, Beatrice nodded. Caroline was struck to the heart. She had never imagined that such a tragedy could have befallen this outwardly light and cheerful person. I think, Beatrice continued, that all these parties and phobias, like the fact that he always takes our cook, Kevin, and one of the maids with him when he goes to other cities, are all ways of distancing himself from this personal drama. Oliver, he loved his father so much, he can't seem to get over losing him. And the bastards who sent Marcus to the grave never got what they deserved. I guess it's all hit him too hard, Caroline muttered thoughtfully to herself. Who would have thought that the rich had more trouble than the common people? All the next night, Caroline could not sleep for some unknown reason. Everything seemed to be going well, but her mind drifted back and forth to Oliver. I wish I knew what kind of man he really is. Maybe this bravado is just a mask, someone more vulnerable, someone she could probably help. A couple of weeks later, exactly what Beatrice had told her about happened. Oliver was going on a business trip of great importance to his business, and, as he always did, he took Kevin, his longtime cook, and his maid with him. The latter, to his great amazement, was Caroline herself. "Why are you so surprised?" Oliver asked her with a slight chuckle. "I need someone I can trust 100% to clean my room and control the food I eat during the trip. I don't think it's a big deal." "Yes, but you don't know me at all," Caroline objected. "I haven't been with you that long. What if I can't do it?" The young man's face took on a serious expression, and then he replied in a voice that sent shivers down Caroline's spine. "Well, if you can't do it, then you and I will have to part. Or we can do it right now if you're not sure you're ready for a business trip. Because that's what a business trip is to you." "No, it's not." "Of course I'll go with you," Caroline said with her lips pressed together. How could she be so foolish as to think that this calculating businessman could have a soul? If Beatrice was right about his worries about her father's death, he was either hiding them very well, or her friend was mistaken. Because how could a man who was ready in 2 seconds to fire another man standing in front of him at that very moment be worried? No, Caroline shook her head as she left her boss's office. Oliver could be anything, but he's certainly not a bereaved person in need of comfort. When all the things were packed and Caroline and Kevin were getting into one of the 2 large jeeps, one for her and the cook, and the other for Oliver and his guard, Kevin said to Caroline with a kind smile, "Don't you worry so much, my dear. I've been traveling with the owner for years, and it's always been fine. It's only for a couple of days. There's nothing to worry about." Caroline answered the cook with a calm but somewhat detached smile. She herself was pricked by something inside her. A bad feeling plagued the young maid. Suddenly, looking up at the upper windows of the mansion, she thought she saw a familiar silhouette flicker into Oliver's study, for a tiny fraction of an instant. She even thought she saw someone's fiery red hair through the window. But it couldn't be. Molly had gone to some foreign resort the other day and was not expected to return for another week at the earliest. It must be your imagination, Caroline said to herself. You should read less detective stories at night. With these thoughts, the girl got into the car. At first the road was good, and the way through a dense forest seemed to the girl even picturesque. But gradually, the closer they got to the wide stone bridge, the more potholes were encountered on their way. The driver explained to Caroline that the road had not been repaired for a long time, and therefore they had to be especially careful here. You don't have to explain to me, she nodded, remembering the tragedy that had happened to her own father. The driver wanted to say something else to Caroline, but suddenly he was attracted by something unusual happening ahead with Oliver's car. His business car, which was considered one of the most reliable in the world, suddenly began to swerve on the road. Every now and then his driver was swerving sideways. What the hell is going on up there? Was all the driver of the Jeep with the cook and the maid could manage to say. When the car in front of him went over the bridge railing at full speed and fell into the water with a loud splash. Oliver, was all Caroline could exclaim in despair. But then their car began to do the same kind of pretzels. What happened? Kevin asked, horrified, his huge blue eyes now huge. Are we all going to crash now? Don't talk rubbish, Kevin, shouted the driver, trying to hold on to the steering wheel. I don't understand. I just had a full inspection last week. What the? He didn't have time to finish, because their Jeep also failed to slow down and went full speed into the river after Oliver's car. Caroline couldn't remember exactly how she'd ended up underwater. It was just a protective reflex, and she opened her eyes, being already a few meters into the deep abyss. The cabin was completely submerged. This she realized at once. Sitting next to her with his eyes wide open was Kevin. Blood was oozing from the wound on his temple. And Caroline realized with bitterness that the poor man had obviously been hit when the car fell. He was dead, and so was the driver, who was almost immediately choked by the powerful torrent of water. Being an excellent swimmer, Caroline had good lung capacity, so she managed to get out of the Jeep quickly enough. The girl looked, trying to find the second car in the murky water. Finally, she saw it. Oliver's car was buried up to its bonnet in the mud, sinking to the bottom of the river. After swimming a few more meters, she saw Oliver's hands floating in the water, which she grabbed and began to pull him upwards, away from the submerged car. With great difficulty, Carolina managed not only to pull her boss up, but also to drag him to the shore, and from there to the nearest road. There, Caroline was able to stop the first car she could find and call an ambulance. Until the medics arrived, the girl gave the victim all the necessary resuscitation measures. She felt Oliver's pulse on the shore, and making sure that he was alive, tried to pump out most of the water from his lungs. Although the man coughed up enough water, he never regained consciousness, so Caroline had to carry him on her back to the nearest motorway. Caroline's own lungs burned like they were on fire. Her legs were shaking. She was sweating and coughing. But she was determined to save Oliver. When the ambulance finally arrived, Caroline described the situation to them, and they realized that there was something wrong and called the police. Caroline and Oliver were taken to the hospital, where they received all the necessary care. As the girl was hardly hurt, she was able to visit Oliver after a few long hours, which seemed like an eternity. The man, who by then had come to his senses, thanked her profusely. "You said you couldn't handle it," he said in a hoarse voice. "You not only managed, but thanks to you I'm still alive. And I can imagine what you had to go through while you dragged me through those woods. I'm sorry, Caroline. I'm ashamed of the way I pointed out your place," Oliver said. "Come on, Oliver," Caroline said. "The most important thing is that you're breathing. My teachers at school told me I had a talent for running. I'm finally getting the hang of it. If I hadn't run so much, I wouldn't have been able to get you out. Except what?" Oliver asked her grimly. Your colleagues Kevin, Nick, Matthew. They're all dead, Caroline said with a heavy heart. Oliver nodded understandingly. I don't understand what happened at all. The cars were in perfect working order, I'm sure of it. Caroline. Oliver glared at his young savior. Is something troubling you? Are you ill? Should I call a doctor? No, Oliver stopped her. No, it's not that. The young man reached into his jacket, which was hanging on the chair, and pulled a thick notebook out of the pocket, followed by a pre-prepared pen, straight from the cover. He wrote something on the tiny piece of paper, and tearing it off, handed it to Caroline. Now you are the only one I can trust. Caroline, not understanding anything, took the slip of paper from his hands. There were some numbers written on it, and the girl counted as many as 10 of them. But what are these? She asked. It's a code. Don't worry, it's not for the safe, Oliver joked. It's just from my work laptop. The computer is in my office, and I have an unusual favor to ask of you. Please, it will help me understand and solve a lot of things. Caroline nodded, and after listening to her superior's request, she drove back home. Meanwhile, an investigator came to Oliver's room. The policeman interviewed the victim and assured him that they would do everything possible to find the intruders as soon as possible. Intruders? Oliver couldn't believe his ears, so it wasn't an accident. I'm afraid not, the policeman shook his head. We have brought the cars to the surface, and judging by the preliminary examination, I have no consolation for you. Someone deliberately cut your brake hose, knowing that you would be traveling in very difficult road conditions, the policeman said. Oliver slowly leaned back on the pillow. Well, they got to me, too, he breathed out heavily. Your father's competitors, the policeman said. I'm sorry, but I've heard about this case. As far as I understand it, they never found who was responsible for Marcus's death. Oliver nodded briefly. I think it's the same people, he said weakly, feeling the familiar fear that the young man had been so successful at drowning out with alcohol all these years. Meanwhile, Caroline arrived at Oliver's mansion and went up to his office as inconspicuously as possible. She realized that all the cameras in the house had probably caught her, but she hoped that in case the security service was displeased with her, the owner of the mansion would somehow protect her in front of them. The girl booted up the ultra-modern flat-screen computer, then entered all 10 digits written for her by Oliver into the password field. Within a second, a blue wheel was spinning on the screen, and then access to the landlord's desktop opened up. A folder labeled Cameras clicked open. Caroline selected the appropriate date and the Garage tab, then waited for the video she wanted to see to load. Literally seconds later, Caroline saw the garage room. And then, the girl did not believe her eyes at first. A red-haired beauty in expensive shoes and the head of security, the man who was supposed to protect Oliver, entered the garage. He quickly looked around and damaged both brake hoses in the very cars they were traveling in today. What followed was an equally disgusting scene. The red-haired beast, who Caroline realized was Molly, gave her partner a kiss, after which they both left the garage at a leisurely pace. Caroline copied the tape to a flash drive, shut down the computer, and only then called the police. When the investigator and the SWAT team arrived at the mansion, the head of security was already packing his bags, expecting to run away with his girlfriend abroad. But Molly, thinking that their cunning plan had come true and Oliver was dead, had no intention of sharing her loot with her lover. Molly was picked up at the airport as she tried to leave the country. The investigation later revealed that Molly was actually working for the same people who took out Marcus, Oliver's father. She didn't take out anyone specifically, but she was promised an extremely large percentage of Oliver's wealth if he died before reaching the site of his next negotiation. So here Molly had charmed the man closest to him and put the idea in his head that she and he could be perfectly happy if they eliminated their wealthy master. Now Molly and Oliver's head of security are facing a hefty prison sentence. In addition, Oliver's ex-fiancée has shamelessly ratted out her own masters to the investigation. After all, the deal with the police guaranteed her a reduced sentence, while her lover from security will receive the maximum. Thanks to Molly's confession, the ringleaders of the rival company that had ordered Oliver's father were quickly identified. As it turned out, they were longtime enemies of their family, the family of the oldest of the brothers, who'd always wanted to take over their grand business. Oliver, coming out of the hospital, realized a lot and completely rethought his life and attitude to people. The young man first of all forever stopped with parties. In addition, Oliver permanently canceled all the stupid rules and fired Amanda, who frightened everyone. After that, he hired a completely different, kind-hearted woman who could not only manage his household perfectly, but also interacted with all his employees and co-workers as if they were family. Caroline continued her work in the house, but now they were very close friends. Their shared story of saving Oliver's life brought them together, and that was just the beginning. 15 years later, there was nowhere to park in front of the school where Caroline had once attended. The car park was packed to the gills. So many people had dreamed of seeing each other. And they'd all been classmates once. Vanessa, now an elderly woman, and once slim, stood in the middle of the hall with her husband at her side. The seated middle-aged man clearly didn't understand why he'd been brought here, but he couldn't resist the will of his wealthy wife. Vanessa began to look even more full and plump than before. But whereas before her fullness had been almost imperceptible and had given her some of the glamour of her lush forms, now everything pointed only to deterioration and health problems, which Vanessa either denied or did not think it necessary to address. The woman could barely squeeze into a thin, sparkling dress, expecting, as it seems, an unforgettable wow effect from her old-school friends. However, those who admired Vanessa, and those who just pretended to admire her so as not to be pestered, could not appreciate the outfit, for the many folds made Vanessa look suspiciously like a sausage. Then a huge black car, gleaming clean, drove up to the school building. All those who were in the auditorium and were actively devouring the delicious food rushed to the window. They were curious as to who was in it. When the doors of the luxurious leather salon opened, a graceful, slender, taut leg appeared. It was wearing graphite gray boots made of the finest suede. Following this, a beautiful young woman stepped out of the car. Thin as a bamboo stalk, but not too thin either. Her body seemed to radiate health and youth, and the modest smile on her beautiful face involuntarily attracted all eyes, like a magnet. "What's going on? What are you all staring at?" Vanessa said impatiently, pushing through the crowd to the window. The woman gasped loudly, and then her face twisted with envy and anger. A few minutes later, Caroline entered the hall, beautiful and blooming like a beautiful flower. Her classmates stared dumbfounded at her gorgeous suit, a tee of English fabric, her flawless hair, and discreet but quality makeup. No one could have imagined that Caroline, whom they had all mocked so meanly in their youth, would not only not lose her natural beauty and charm, but on the contrary, become the most successful woman of them all. "Hello, Caroline, how are you?" Vanessa stepped forward. "I see you're doing pretty well for yourself. How much do you pay your beautician? Or are you still doing it the old-fashioned way with a cucumber?" Vanessa laughed, pleased with her joke. However, apart from her, no one else made a sound. "Hello, Vanessa." Caroline greeted her calmly. "I just came in for a few minutes. I wanted to see you all. Take another look at my past. One last time to make sure I hadn't lost anything." Caroline took a few more steps toward Vanessa and pointed to her neck. There, as before, hung her father's gift, a pendant in the shape of a star, which the girl had bought with her first salary. "You know, Vanessa, you haven't changed a bit," the woman told her, enjoying the way her former classmate was literally bursting with envy. "You're still just as stupid, and your jokes are stupid too." Caroline looked at Vanessa from head to toe, and with one last glance at the crowd of her former classmates who had fallen from anger, boredom, and time, She slowly made her way back to the exit, saying one last time, "You see, life always knows who has done how much good and evil. Someone chooses to follow his star or gets a chance to become one of its rays. And someone remains an empty, shiny bubble for the rest of his life, from which the whole shell, alas, crumbles with time. Happy life to you all, boys." Caroline walked down to the door of the school. Her classmates immediately rushed back to the window. Oliver got out of the car that was waiting for her outside. He was still as tall and stately as ever, only now he wore a pair of slim-fitting glasses on the bridge of his nose. He was followed first by a boy of about 12, and then a girl of about 7. The children hugged Caroline happily, and Oliver smiled as he rubbed the heads of his offspring. Caroline turned round and Oliver gave her a long kiss, full of tenderness and love. Then, after the whole story of the cars crashing into the river, he suddenly realized how different this girl was from any woman he had ever met. Courageous, strong, unbending, like a stem of bamboo. She always knew exactly what she wanted and was determined to achieve it. And tender and shy at the same time, pure as a petal of the most beautiful rose. She gave him everything he was looking for in this world and more. When he proposed to her, she told him yes. It was the happiest day of his life. When 6 months after the wedding Caroline told him that they were expecting a child, Oliver finally felt that he was no longer alone in the world. Now they both had a chance to live the life they both deserved, and nothing in the world could stop them. As Caroline and Oliver's car drove away, they did not see how hysterical Vanessa was long afterwards. How she tore at her artificial hair and how she cursed everything in the world, not understanding why Caroline, the technician's daughter, had been able to get everything in this life that should have been hers. Instead, all she had was money, which never made Vanessa happy. Yes, an alcoholic husband who married her just to get a good position in her father's company. Time had not spared her looks. Life hadn't added to her wisdom. And all this Vanessa realized only now, when it was too late to change anything.